Hello, everyone. How are we all doing? Right, let's get this show on the road. The Rings of Power has been something I have covered extensively on this channel. I've done a reaction to, I think, pretty much every trailer that's come out for this thing, at least the main trailers, the official trailers, whatever you want to call them. And they've been actually some of the most favorite streams to do on this channel. Really great conversation with everyone, a good discussion going on. And today we have finally reached the time where it's been released until the masses. So this came out last night for us in the UK at 2 a.m. I didn't stay up to watch it. I value my sleep way more than I do the Rings of Power. So this was my lovely morning viewing material. I got through both episodes this morning. I tweeted out earlier as well. As I was watching them, I was like, I have thoughts on this thing. I've taken notes. And it's going to be fun. We're going to discuss it from what I can remember of it. It's a very forgettable show. So I'm going to do my best to remember as much as I can. Already we've got Odin. How you doing, man? Really good to see you again. I think we're in for an absolute treat with this discussion, aren't we? We have a lot to talk about for sure. Nikki, how the hell are you doing? Good to see you as well. Oh, it's the whole gang's back together. This is great. This is great. You're my people. You're my people. Love it. We'll wait for a few more people to come in. Hopefully they get the notifications and stuff like that. So just a little bit of housekeeping to kick things off. If you haven't done so already, do please subscribe to the channel for more movie reviews, discussions, and live streams, and live stream discussions on the Rings of Power. Unfortunately, it seems like at this point I've taken it upon myself. I will take up this terrible task, this terrible quest to review each and every single episode of this season, whether it makes it to a season 2 and whether I decide I want to watch season 2. That's, well, we'll find out, won't we? But I'm going to try, guys. I'm going to try as much as I can to make it through season 1. But after these first 2 episodes, it's really difficult to want to do that. But I'm going to try. And do follow me on Twitter as well. You can find me at Hobbit Fan Editor. There I'll post all the times that I go live and when you can expect reviews on this. I think it's a fair bet to say every single Friday at 11 p.m. If that works for you guys, that works for me. So if we lock that in as our sort of schedule for each week, there's a space here, an open discussion, free discussion. Maybe you like the Rings of Power. Maybe you hate it. Maybe you're kind of on the fence about it after watching the episodes today. Any opinion is valid. I will say that. It's an open discussion here. I'm not going to cancel anyone. I'm not going to talk over anyone like most channels will. And like most people will. All opinions are welcome here. They really are. And, that's a good starting off point. Let me know what you think of the Rings of Power, because I'm about to tell you what I thought of it as well. He says, my gosh, that is a daunting task. It absolutely is. But, someone's got to do it, haven't they? Although saying that, there's loads of channels doing it as well. We're all in this together. And at the moment, that's my therapy. It really is. You know what? No word of a lie. After watching the 2 episodes today, it really just highlights even more, like it needed highlighting anyway, just how fucking good the Peter Jackson trilogy is of The Lord of the Rings. That started filming in the late 90s, and it's light years better than this shit made in 2022. It's actually made me want to go back and rewatch the films, and I only rewatched them maybe 2 months ago, if that. And I kind of want to go back and rewatch them again, almost to cleanse the palate. Maybe it's going to be like a weekly thing after every single episode of this piece of shit TV show I'm having to watch. I want to watch Peter Jackson's trilogy. Guys, I don't have a plan for this. I don't have a written plan. I have written notes, but this was more just like a stream of consciousness kind of thing. So I'll go through it, and I'll try and go through it in order of the episode as to what I can remember. Odin says both aren't faithful to Lord of the Rings. Are you referring to Peter Jackson's movies, or are you referring to both the episodes of this series? Or I need a little bit of context on that, dude. But if you're talking about these 2 episodes that came out today, yeah, absolutely, damn right they ain't faithful to Tolkien. So this was my attitude going into today. I knew this series wasn't going to be good. Just from all the trailers, I always kind of start off all my streams like this on the Rings of Power. From every bit of marketing, from every poster to every interview, every featurette, every trailer, every article calling people toxic and everything like that, I knew this was going to be an absolute dumpster fire. So watching this show today, I knew this wasn't going to be faithful to Tolkien. And Odin, I'll get to your point in just a second. I knew this wasn't going to be faithful to Tolkien. I know this was going to be pretty much fan fiction, the series. When it says based on the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, it kind of eats away at me every single time, because I'm like, it's in Tolkien in name only. There's nothing remotely Tolkien about this, really. Its whole original story. It's a fan fiction. The whole series is fan fiction. None of this shit happened, and if events did happen, completely different ways. So I wanted to just, watch this show today as its own thing. Just going, this doesn't appeal to me as a Tolkien fan. This doesn't appeal to me as a Lord of the Rings fan. I just want to watch this as like its own fantasy TV series with original characters and original events and everything like that. And even in that respect, even in just kind of divorcing my opinions from Tolkien and, the source material and everything like that, even the Peter Jackson movies, and just taking it on its own merits, I still thought it was just boring. I thought the pacing of it was terrible. The writing was just absolute shit. And none of these characters they're presenting are compelling or well written, and not very well acted. Some of them were okay. I'll talk about those characters when I get to them, but everything was just kind of it's bad. It's a boring fantasy series, and nothing about it looks remotely like Lord of the Rings anyway. I will say that. I know it was shot in New Zealand. A lot of effects work going on as well. You can definitely see that a lot of the budget has probably gone into the CGI, most of which isn't that great. It's very noticeable. The scenes, for example, where Elrond's walking through Khazad-dûm, and I think I mentioned this in one of the trailers when I was sort of freeze framing it through all of the thing. It's the compositing between him, the live action element, and the CGI stuff behind is really noticeable, and you can just clearly tell he's just walking on a soundstage. So I know this is like the most expensive TV show in history or something like that. I can't remember what the budget is per episode or how much has been spent on it, but a fuck ton of money has been spent on this show. And because there's so many CGI effects on the screen, that's where the budget's gone, but a lot of it just doesn't look that great to me. And here's the thing, when you get like an establishing shot that maybe does look great, for example, if I start with the positive, I think my favorite shot of the whole thing was the shot of the two trees of Valinor, when it's kind of the hills are alive with the sound of music kind of shot, where the camera goes over the hill and you get the two trees of Valinor in the background. That's probably my favorite shot in the whole thing. So you get shots like that, but for the most part, you'll get this beautiful, expansive establishing shot. But then the whole rest of the scene is in like this, you can tell they're on like a soundstage, like this really small, not cheap set. I'm not saying that anything in this show is remotely cheap, but you expect that, let's see more of this grand landscape that we're in. But then we just like dial in for like a close up, and it feels very small scale from what they were initially setting us up beforehand with these, wonderful vistas that we're meant to see with CGI. Let me just go through. So going back to Odin, what you said towards the beginning, when you said both aren't faithful to J.R.R. Tolkien, Peter Jackson and today. I am inclined to agree with you on Peter Jackson's Hobbit trilogy, if we're comparing it to the Hobbit book. I disagree with you on the Lord of the Rings trilogy. It does make a lot of changes. It leaves a lot of stuff out from the source material. Of course, it has to. It can't adapt everything that's on the page, because the film would be Christ knows how many hours long. You'd have to probably turn it into about 10 films to cover, even remotely begin to cover everything. But what I think is faithful to Tolkien, when you mentioned there, both aren't faithful to Tolkien. Peter Jackson's trilogy, to me, is faithful to the spirit of Tolkien and the themes of the stories and the thematic and like the emotions that Tolkien was trying to get through in his text. I think Peter Jackson was incredibly successful in visually realizing the world of Middle Earth on screen. And of all those themes and elements that you do find within the text. A lot of it does use text directly from the book and actual wording that Tolkien used. They always kept going back to the book. Do they leave things out? Do they change things? The Scouring of the Shire, yeah, that's different. We leave out Tom Bombadil. you know, we kind of take in the extended edition of Two Towers, we take the concept of Old Man Willow, but we move it to Fangorn. So they do chop and change a lot of stuff in the Lord of the Rings films. I'm not saying they don't. And there are some changes that I'm not too keen on and wish they'd have kept them as they are in the book. Of course I do. But I think as a whole, it's incredibly faithful to the material of J.R.R. Tolkien. And I think it's definitely, if any other adaptation comes out in the future, I think it's definitely going to be a hard act to follow to try and top what Peter Jackson conveyed on screen for that Lord of the Rings trilogy. That being said, I am open to seeing another take on The Hobbit. So, yeah, if there's another film studio wants to take another stab at The Hobbit, I'd definitely be down for seeing that. Odin says, my issue with the Silmarillion is that Tolkien never published it because he fucking died. It was published in the 70s after Tolkien had died. My issue with the Silmarillion is that Tolkien never published it. To me, there is only Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit as someone else published it, cashed in on a legacy. I see what you're saying with that, in that, you know, it's kind of the artist's intention whether things should be released. I guess the argument for that is also posthumously released music. You know, like after Michael Jackson died, I think they've still only released 2 albums, haven't they? There was the first album was Michael, and the second album was Escape, which were like demos that Michael Jackson was like sitting on and, you know, didn't do anything with. And then because they wanted to make some money, they dipped into his back catalogue and they remixed them, and they got other artists to come in and try and cobble them all together, and then sold it as a final, you know, posthumous Michael Jackson record. And of course, maybe the artist's intention was that he never wanted any of those to see the light of day. I would argue now that Tolkien's Tolkien's descendants, his current living relatives who are in charge of the estate, are cashing in on a legacy, which is precisely what's led to this. It's interesting how, to my knowledge, I can't remember if work started on this series before Christopher Tolkien's death, or if this show started being made after his death. I forget. So I don't want to say if it's one way or another. I'm not sure on the dates on that, so maybe someone can confirm that for me or correct me on that. But I definitely think you're going to see a lot more cashing in on it now, certainly, than it did with Christopher Tolkien. And I don't think Christopher Tolkien was cashing in on a legacy at all. I think he was an excellent steward of his father's work to pour over all of those notes, all those random notes, scattered notes that aren't connected in any way, cobble them all together in something that, you know, functions as a narrative structure, and to publish it and share those stories with everyone that maybe would never have seen the light of day, I think is excellent, because I absolutely adore the Silmarillion. I actually prefer the Silmarillion as a book to the Lord of the Rings in many ways. And it really does flesh out the world, and it's wonderful. That and the unfinished tales, and, you know, the critiques. He never puts his own stamp on it. I think if he was cashing in on his father's legacy, it would be the equivalent of what we're getting with Dune at the moment, where I think it's the son, isn't it? It's usually the son of the author is writing his own books within the Dune world, and apparently I've never read them, so I can't comment, but I've heard they're nowhere near as good. And he's trying to put his own stamp on what his father created and the world that his father created. Christopher Tolkien never did that. There is no, you know, there's no written thing by Christopher Tolkien where he's trying to write more of the mythology or anything like that. He's literally taking his father's notes, which were written by Tolkien himself, and putting them together in a cohesive order into numerous books. You know, of course, you've got the Silmarillion, the Unfinished Tales, and then you've got the 3 great tales with Beren and Luthien, Children of Húrin, and the Fall of Gondolin. Of course, you've got the 12-volume series as well, the History of Middle-earth, chronicling, you know, his father's process and how he eventually evolved this world. So he's very much just taking stuff that Tolkien himself wrote. He hasn't tried writing anything himself. So I would agree with that argument if Christopher Tolkien had written some book set, you know, maybe he'd written the 4th Lord of the Rings book or something, like a sequel to the Lord of the Rings to continue it. And he never did. He just took what his father had written and, you know, shared it with the world, which I think is a wonderful thing. I really do. It's an interesting conversation to have, though, for sure. Sort of, you know, artist's intent, you know, after death. Nikki says, well, it's not possible to be 100% faithful. Converting from book to film, the difference is Peter Jackson was able to convey Tolkien's message and the feel of, yeah, precisely. It felt like it felt like legend. I think I mentioned this last time, that in the appendices and the behind the scenes, Peter Jackson mentions that he kind of got all of his crew together who were filming, and before they started rolling the cameras or even the conceptual design, he kind of pitched to them that I want us to basically, almost like we're filming history, we're creating history right now. We've stumbled upon to these locations. You know, we've walked into Rivendell with our film cameras and we're going to film there. And the look of the film and just the costume design, the aesthetic of it, all of it did feel legendary. It felt old fashioned. It felt like a piece of history. It almost felt like a tapestry come to life in many ways. And it's wonderful, just from visually how it's realized, and the conceptual design, the armor creation, the set design, props, models, costumes, just everything, miniatures, creature design. It's all wonderful. It's all fantastic. Nikki says Rings of Power just felt weird. I don't know. It was like choppy and random. That's where the pacing comes into it. That's what I mean. So as I mentioned, I was watching this show as I kind of switched off the Lord of the Rings portion of my brain as much as I could. And I thought, does this hold up as just kind of like a generic fantasy series? And it really doesn't. The jumping around between characters reminds me of kind of how Game of Thrones was structured, in that, you know, you'll go over the water to Pentos and spend some time with Daenerys, and then we'll come back up to Winterfell and with the Starks and down in King's Landing. And it was very jumpy, but the differences between Game of Thrones, at least the earlier seasons of Game of Thrones, and this is that the dialogue and the characters in those earlier seasons were compelling, and you were kind of hanging on every word, and it was really, you know, there was a lot of political intrigue. There was things happening with the plot that were intriguing, and, you know, twists and turns and everything like that. We're 2 episodes into this thing so far, and it's just so monotonous and slow and meandering, and the acting isn't great, and the writing especially is absolutely dreadful. There are some absolute corkers of lines in this, and we're only 2 episodes in. And the rest of the dialogue, if it's not really dumb expositional on the nose dialogue, which is just really bad, it feels like trying to hit it, whoever's writing the script feels like they're trying to hit a word count, and it's very verbose and it's very exaggerated, and it feels like someone who's trying to create this lofty dialogue akin to something that would be from Tolkien's books or the Lord of the Rings, and just failing miserably. There's my first note from the episode is where Finrod, Galadriel's brother, it's the very first scene, I think, where he's talking to his younger sister, and he says, "Do you know why a ship sails and a stone cannot?" And I just thought, go on, please enlighten me. And you're thinking, wow, elves really have no concept of buoyancy and how boats are constructed and how they, you know, the surface area on the water and everything compared to a rock that's dense. And it's like, oh, it's because stones are called to the light under the water or something, and ships are called to the stars. And then Galadriel's like, yes, but what can't? But light is also, stars are also reflected in the water, so it's just, it's like hitting a word count. As I said, it's this trying to create a metaphor. It's like if anyone did English literature class, right, and you had to write an essay or a dissertation on something, and it would be like, Shakespeare said the curtains in this scene were red. Explain why the curtains are red. And you just completely bullshit. And it's like, red is the color of passion, which links to this character and their lust for this character, or whatever it happens to be. And you're just completely bullshitting out of your butthole, like just random verbose nonsense. That's what it felt like in the in the dialogue. And they're talking about why why a boat floats and a stone sinks. And I'm just there thinking of like Monty Python. It's just like, so logically, if if she weighs the same as a duck, she is made of wood and therefore a witch, or whatever it is. I can't remember the dialogue. It was just so bad, and that was our first dialogue in the movie. Galadriel only apparently has one brother as well. There's no mention of her other two brothers, Angrod and Aignor. I think it's Aignor. No mention of them at all. Now, I do want to stress this as well. If anyone's tuning in or watching along, I am not a Tolkien scholar by any stretch of the imagination. I've read the books. I've read The Hobbit numerous times. Lord of the Rings, I've read probably about 4 times. Silmarillion, I'm on my 3rd time. So I don't know all the names. I don't know all the places. I don't know all the years of events. I'm not a complete through and through Tolkien scholar. I can hold my own, but I'm not a Tolkien scholar. But to my knowledge, Galadriel's brother, like, they really fuck with the times with it. Because I think, if I remember rightly, Finrod dies in the pits. He's held prisoner by Sauron, and he kind of lets his werewolves on people in this torture pit, which kind of looks like is something that we're probably going to get next episode, in episode 3. It's the scene that you've seen in the trailers with Diversity Elf, when he's like running up chains and doing like all crazy Matrix shit. Finrod died in a torture pit, and I think he fought like a werewolf barehanded, if I remember rightly. And then he died there, and then later, I think he was the first elf that was reincarnated in the West, I think, in Valinor. I might be misremembering that, but to my knowledge, his death is at a completely different time than what was shown at the beginning of this thing. They skip a lot. I was expecting this like massive prologue episode, and we only really got a handful of scenes, and they're very, very quick. There's the whole 2 trees of Valinor as well, which I mentioned, Laurelin and Telperion. And then in the voiceover, Galadriel says, Morgoth stole the light of the 2 trees. And I thought, if we want to split hairs, it was technically Morgoth and Ungoliant. And I was really hoping in that shot you'd see like this big silhouette of like a giant spider. That would have been really cool, just behind it. There are a couple of shots, in these first few scenes that I guess were kind of cool to look at. We only see him from afar, and it does look very similar to the movie counterpart, but I really like the silhouette of Sauron. He's got like this really kind of cool staff in his fortress that we only get like one really quick few second shot of him. And as I said, it just looks like the design from the movies. So I guess by me praising this is that they decided to keep the design of Sauron pretty similar to what he is in the films. So I guess that was kind of cool. And then there's a pretty decent shot of a dragon attacking an eagle, which is what I expect is the War of Wrath. But beyond that, that shot from the trailer when it's kind of like the mosh pit of the elves fighting the orcs, it does look very video game-ish. It does remind me of, the Battle of the Five Armies kind of stuff from the last Hobbit movie, where it's just kind of like a collage of CGI, and it's just like a Where's Wally or Where's Waldo if you're in the States kind of puzzle. So I guess that's my positives on the show, is that there's a few cool little, if you pause the frame, I guess it would make a cool wallpaper kind of thing. Let's read some of your comments here. There we go, Nikki. Nikki, I know that you're an Ungoliant fan as well. I know you're like me. We want a giant spider. We want to see Ungoliant on screen, and this was their chance to do it. They could have done that. They didn't need to go in depth into the whole thing. They very much could have just gone, it began with the darkening of the 2 trees or something like that, and then you just see the trees fade and just this giant sort of spider unfurling its legs behind it or something. That would have been cool. That's all I would have needed, just some kind of nod to it. But instead, Morgoth was the one who did it. I'm like, well, he orchestrated the plan with Ungoliant, and if anything, he kind of got way in over his head, because Ungoliant was way more powerful than he was and overpowered him. Remember that amazing scene from the Silmarillion where, Ungoliant's going for the Silmarils, and then Morgoth cries out in that valley and the Balrogs come to his aid. He was in over his head. It was a plan hatched between him and Ungoliant, but then Ungoliant took the lead and just was a loose cannon at that point. So technically, I'd give the edge and say Ungoliant was the culprit of the darkening of the 2 trees. Odin says they're selling each age to different companies to milk. Christopher Tolkien left in 2017. so wouldn't have been involved. Yeah. So that's what I'm thinking. I couldn't remember when they started work on this thing. I didn't know if there was like a huge pre-production or rights thing to it, but it's very interesting that Amazon waited until he died before moving ahead with anything. I think that's quite telling. Not to mention that, but you also had the departure of a lot of, Tom Shippey, for example, one of the Tolkien scholars that worked on both of Peter Jackson's trilogies. Like, this is a guy who lives and breathes Tolkien. Like, he knows it like the back of his hand, and he even stood by throughout all the decisions in the Hobbit trilogy. And there's loads of decisions in Peter Jackson's Hobbit trilogy that I don't agree with. And he was still a part of it. And he left this one, and I can only assume because he disagreed with the direction they were going in, and just the complete bastardization of Tolkien's life's work. I think a bunch of other producers left as well. I'm not sure on the reason for their departure. Could be anything. I don't want to get too tinfoil hatty about it because I don't know all the facts and everything, but that was the first kind of nail in the coffin for me back in the day, was when Tom Shippey left. And I thought, that's not a good sign. That's not really a seal of approval, is it? It's interesting. Christopher Tolkien disliked Peter Jackson's films, and let's be honest, if Tolkien was alive, I'm pretty sure he would have disliked the films as well. He was very protective of his father's work. You could argue that he is the ultimate purist because he is the son of the man who created it himself, and was brought up around those stories, literally from probably the cradle. And that's how the Hobbit book was written in the first place, was as a bedtime story for his children. And I can understand that, looking at the films from the outside in, he probably thought they were just kind of turned into like action films. And, the action is dialed up certainly a lot more for the films, but I think that's necessary for a visual medium. He probably was unhappy that a lot of the elements got changed and moved around. So, I can understand that. And I think being that close to the source, being that close to the creation of this mythology itself, he probably felt it. The movies kind of diluted a lot of the stuff down. Personally, I still think that Peter Jackson's it's the greatest achievement in cinema history, as far as I'm concerned. And taking a book like that was considered unfilmable and filming it, and making one of the most groundbreaking trilogies of all time, it's a tremendous achievement. The same cannot be said for the Rings of Power. So let's go through it a lot more. So, as I mentioned, I've kind of opened with my positives. They're my positives on the 2 episodes. You can tell I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel for stuff here. So please do bear with me, because I'm going to have to go through my notes and try and remember this. And here's the thing, it's so forgettable as a show. It's so painfully dull. And I was checking my watch the whole time trying to get through this thing. I watched the first episode, and then I just took a long break in between before starting episode 2, because I couldn't do both of these directly back to back. I just couldn't. So let's see. I've talked about Finrod and kind of the verbose. Oh yeah, so we kick off with basically the climbing of the wall from Game of Thrones, don't we? We've seen it in all of the trailers. All of them clad in plate armor and everything, climbing a wall, which really to me isn't climbing gear, but what the fuck do I know, right? And right from the off, you've got Galadriel, the commander of the commander. She's a commander now, apparently. Commander Galadriel, of course she is. And all of the men are out of breath and weak and, having to take a breath. And they turn around and it's where's Galadriel? And they look up and she's halfway up the mountain, abandoning her people because she's on a quest for vengeance to revenge her brother Finrod. And we're just going to ignore her other 2 brothers because apparently they don't exist. And of course, to me in this thing, they're clearly going with the strong woman, warrior Galadriel, Joan of Arc Galadriel, whatever you want to call her. And Galadriel as a character in the novels is strong. She's one of the strongest characters in Middle-earth, I would say. She's one of the strongest beings in Middle-earth. But she is a mage. She is a counselor. She rules her own kingdom. Alongside her husband, Celebrimbor, who I will get onto in just a second, because I've watched a bunch of channels that apparently have insider information. and have seen all the leaks and have said that all the leaks are true so far. Apparently, according to this show, in episode 7, we find out that Celeborn, Galadriel's husband, who she should be married to at this point, is dead. Apparently, she says the line something like, "I lost a brother and I lost a husband." Which, this is kind of going to go into what was going to be my critique for episode 2. When she starts, when she's alongside Elrond and talking to him. And Elrond says a line, I think I wrote it down on here, and I'm pretty sure it's from episode 2. Elrond says, he calls Galadriel my friend. And I was like, no, she shouldn't be your friend. She should be your mother-in-law. Because where the fuck is Celebrimbor, who is Galadriel's daughter, who is the wife of Elrond, who is the mother of Arwen? We're in the Second Age now, and as far as I know, I think, I mean, I don't know how far we are into the Third Age. It never really says, at the beginning of Fellowship of the Ring, Bilbo Baggins in the extended edition quite clearly gives the date, it's the 22nd of September in the year 1300 by Shire reckoning. Middle Earth, the Third Age of this world. It's very clear where we're taking place within this mythology. And you don't really get any sense of that. You get your flashback sequences at the beginning, and then all we know is that we're in the Second Age, but they fucked around with so much of the lore and added like a whole bunch of their own stuff into it that I don't know whereabouts we are in the Second Age. As far as I remember, I think that Celebrimbor was born 300 years into the Second Age. But with like Celebrimbor being around and about to start work on what we assume is the Rings of Power, it's the namesake of the show. Although apparently no Rings of Power are created this season. I guess because they've got 5 seasons worth, they need to pad. They need to drag that shit out until like season 2 or season 3 maybe. But yeah, I'm like, where is Celeborn? Where is Celebrimbor? None of this makes any sense. And of course, they're trying to dial up the strength of Galadriel. She's she's a commander. She's leading men in battle. She's like a ninja, and she can fight with a sword, and she can lead cavalry charges, and she can do this, she can do that, and she can do it all without breaking a sweat. And that fundamentally isn't what Galadriel's character is. And to me, that kind of cheapens the feminine strength that was Galadriel. She was meant to be, this radiant beauty that literally emitted light, because she had seen the light of the 2 trees. She was a high elf who was in Valinor, and Peter Jackson went through meticulous detail to get that through on screen. When you get Galadriel's entrance in Fellowship of the Ring, it's this huge built-up thing, and without uttering a single line of dialogue, from how it's shot to how she descends those stairs kind of through the light, and then we get Cate Blanchett, you are in the shoes of all the Fellowship that are just absolutely astounded by her beauty, and you almost can't look upon her because she is so beatific and otherworldly that you can't comprehend it. And to get that across within the film as well, like this detail, who thinks of this shit? They filmed with, if I remember rightly from the behind the scenes, they filmed with Christmas lights, like fairy lights behind the camera, so that when Cate Blanchett was in shot, you could see the fairy lights kind of twinkling in her eyes to symbolize that she's seen the lights of the 2. Like, who thinks of this shit? Like, that meticulous detail right there. And you get none of that. Like, I know certain channels call her Galadriel because that's what modern media thinks. That's how you have to write strong women now, is that you have to give them all of these masculine traits, which is a complete oxymoron when you think about it. It's like they're trying to make stronger female characters and more representation for strong women by giving them masculine traits. So they're saying that you can only be a strong woman by being more like a man, but we want to kind of downplay men now, and we want to showcase women more. So do you see what I mean? It's this weird dichotomy that's in the head of modern media right now. And it's not just this, it's everything. You're getting it with Star Wars, you get mostly Disney, you're getting it with, Marvel shit, you're getting it with Star Wars, and they just can't write them because by doing that, they give them those more masculine traits and make them good at everything. They take away any kind of fallibility, I don't know if that's a word, or any sense of weakness or any sense of strife or turmoil in these characters. All the ingredients that go into make a compelling character, they've just ripped that out. It's like playing a video game with cheat codes on, like God mode cheats and vulnerability and all that. It's just boring. It's just fucking boring. and they forget to give them a personality or any kind of charm or any kind of, you know, stakes within the story or anything like that. Galadriel, and I've nothing against the actress herself. I'm sure she's absolutely wonderful. And I don't know if it's the material she's been given or the direction she's been given, is so wooden and fucking boring and obnoxious in these first 2 episodes at least. And I don't see her getting any better, judging by the scenes that we've seen from the trailers and where it's going to lead to. She's just so infinitely boring and so divorced from all of the qualities that make Galadriel her own character. The fact that we come into it where she's a commander, and not just that, she's a fucking terrible commander. She doesn't have the respect of her men. All of her people that are following her give up on her, and you know, down tools, they throw their swords down and just go, we're not having any of this. You know, it's terrible. It's like Admiral Holdo in The Last Jedi. She's a fucking terrible leader of men, of people, of everyone, of the rebels, that it leads to a mutiny, and all the mutineers completely have the right idea. You know, she's not to be trusted. She doesn't divulge any plans or give anyone a sense of hope, and is just a bit of a cunt to everyone. And that's kind of what Galadriel is to people in this. You've got a scene where, you know, as I mentioned, she's scaling the wall. She just leaves everyone behind. That's not a good leader. You know, don't they say, like, a good leader is one who leads from behind, because you keep an eye on all of your people in front. When they make it on top of the wall and are kind of walking across the ice, you know, she's completely deluded and misguided and just hell-bent on vengeance. She's like, no, we need to find... They're in Forage and they're looking for Sauron's fortress. And she's like, no, we keep moving. And one of the guys is like, we should make camp and look for this place in the morning. You know, the place will still be there tomorrow, and we need to rest because we're all dying of exhaustion and, you know, hypothermia and frostbite and everything like that. A guy collapses at the back of the troop, and like he's had it. Like he just collapses, and someone runs back for him and says, like, we need to help him. And she's like, no, we keep moving. She wants to leave him behind to fucking die. That is not a good leader. She is a terrible, terrible commander. Weird you know, I've just got to go on this tangent beforehand as well. The way that the elves are depicted, and I've talked about this with the trailers, short-haired elves just look fucking terrible. I don't know why they've done that as well. It's never been depicted that way. They're not described as that way in the books. They've got like all these trendy haircuts, and you're kind of looking there like, how the hell would they have managed some of these haircuts? Our diversity elf later on, who we'll get on to, has a fucking weave. How? It's like, it's just outstanding to me. Just conceptually, like, everything's way the fuck off, and it might be a slight thing for some people, but I don't know. The short-haired elves just look fucking terrible to me. They eventually make it to like Sauron's fortress in Forage, and an elf, if I'm remembering this correctly, he says something like, this place is so evil that fire now burns cold. And to test this, he kind of just puts his whole hand in this flaming torch. I think I'm remembering that correctly. And then I think Galadriel starts punching through sheets of ice. My memory is very hazy on this, guys. I watched it this morning as soon as I woke up, and it just had no lasting impact on me at all. And then, okay, then we get to the snow troll sequence. And once again, none of the elves, you know, Galadriel takes these elves with them, and none of them can fight. A whole group of elves can't take down a snow troll. All of her people are fucking dying. This snow troll is just wrecking their shit, just slamming them into the walls, like stamping on them. But there's one person who can take it down single-handedly. Of course, that's Galadriel, who does it with all of her superb ninja skills without breaking a sweat. And she even does like this kind of, we saw this in the trailer from last time, didn't we? She even does like this epic sword twirl, like it's a finishing move to a video game or something like that. And she just looks so pretty. She's not rushing to the aid of her comrades or anything like that. There's many times where if it was that easy to kill one, she could have just like rushed in straight away and just done it and saved half of the people, but she didn't. And it's just moments like that that just amount up, that just show how ludicrously OP they've made Galadriel, just for the sake of, you know, oh, we need a strong woman in there. But instead of actually making her strong of will, or, you know, giving it like making her strong of spirit like Galadriel is in the books, they've just completely gone for the lowest common denominator and just made her this really boring, tanky character that just talks down to everyone, that's just fucking obnoxious and miserable to listen to, and is just a terrible character. She just, the way it's acted as well, it's just very one note. And again, like, I don't want to blame the actress for that. I don't know the actress. Is it Morwen something? I think the way I remember her name is that I don't know if anyone played this game on PS2. It's called Lord of the Rings: The Third Age, and I do have a lot of fond memories of that game. It was not lore faithful at all, and it kind of ran in parallel to the movies to a point. It was this turn-based RPG game. And yeah, like, you join Gandalf on the Bridge of Khazad-dûm and you fight the Balrog, and it's meant to kind of tie in with the movies a lot of the times, but then there's also scenes like that where you're fighting the Balrog on the Bridge of Khazad-dûm alongside Gandalf, and I was like, I don't think the bridge was wide enough to have like a whole row of people fighting him. But it was a fun game anyway, and I think one of the characters in that was called Morwen, so I remember the actress's name who plays Galadriel, because I think it's something like that. Nothing against her. Like, I don't know what she's acted in before. I actually don't know pretty much any of the actors really in this whole show. I know the guy who plays Elrond played a young Ned Stark in Game of Thrones. Lenny Henry, of course, is famous in the UK more as a comedian, stand-up comic, and did, various sketch shows and everything. I don't know where you guys are coming out from, actually. So do let me know whereabouts you're tuning in from tonight. I don't know how popular Lenny Henry is internationally, but in the UK, he's mostly a comedian. Beyond that, I actually don't really know any of the other actors in there. So I don't know if it's a script writing thing that she doesn't really have much to work with, and the dialogue's very trite and very one note, or if it's a direction thing, if she's just been told to act that way and just told to act tough and, like this and that. But another thing as well is that she's kind of a commander under Gil-Galad, and to me that just completely betrays what Galadriel's character should be. Like, they're trying to make her this strong female character by making a commander under Gil-Galad, this able-bodied. The way that they're kind of decked out in the armor and everything, it's almost like a Knights of the Round Table kind of thing under Gil-Galad. But the whole reason that Galadriel left Valinor and wanted to, make the crossing across the Sundering Seas, or she actually crossed the Helcaraxe, but she wanted to set up her own kingdom. She wanted to rule her own kingdom. But now they've tried to make it tough by making a commander under someone, like a military kind of commander, but she's working under someone, and Galadriel would never do that. She rules her own kingdom alongside her husband, Celeborn. It would be Celeborn who does the battle, because in Tolkien's world, women don't do battle. It's a European mythology, kind of a medieval type mythology, and that's the whole point. What makes Eowyn so bold and daring is that she stands up to the conformity of the time. But women don't do battle in this. But apparently they do now. Apparently they do in the Second Age, but then don't in the Third Age, because this is a movie prequel, right? Are we still tying it into the films? I still don't know what they're trying to do. Are they trying to do their own thing? But then you've got similar designs to Sauron, and the Balrog looks exactly the same. So it's kind of like half in and half out. I don't know what the fuck they're trying to do with it. But yeah, the long and short of it is just Warrior Galadriel is just fucking insufferable and just really one note and boring. So then I think we go to Lindon, don't we, after that, if I remember rightly, and there's like this huge firework display. Oh, Odin, yeah, no, dude, you make a great point there. It's legally not allowed to be tied into the films. Yeah, the whole rights of... It's really difficult to keep track of where all the rights... There's a lot of fingers and a lot of pies with this. To my knowledge, and you're absolutely right, I think that with this TV show, they can adapt the Second Age elements of the appendices, but not anything from the Silmarillion. Only stuff that's described in the Second Age stuff in the appendices of the Lord of the Rings. I think that's what they have the rights to, which is scant few pages, and they really don't have much to work with. I think Warner Brothers, New Line still own the rights to the Lord of the Rings, and adapting Lord of the Rings in terms of films. I think MGM, New Line, and Warner Brothers each have an equal stake in the Hobbit films, I think, if I remember rightly. But isn't it entering public domain soon? I don't know what that's going to do. So I don't know if other studios might be able to do Hobbit shit as well. I'm not sure. No one has the rights to the Silmarillion. And then another company now, I think, has video game rights to the Lord of the Ring. It's all over the place. It's all fucked. Hey, dude, we got Will back. Lord Oakenshield has returned. He says, I've seen the first 2 episodes as I expected. It's boring as fuck. Thank you. That was my opening statement, dude. I don't know if you're going to go back and watch the rest of this review, so I'll catch you up now. My opening statement was that I knew that this wasn't going to be told, faithful to source material. It was going to be doing its own thing and basically be a fan fiction, the series. But at least if it was an entertaining and well written and well acted fan fiction, then I might have still been able to watch it and just turn my brain off. But it's not. It's boring as fuck. It's written terribly and it's acted terribly. So what am I meant to take away with from this series? But yeah, we go to Linden and they're celebrating, right? And there's all these fireworks. And when we cut to the fireworks, that to me was a clear sort of visual signifier. I thought we were going back to the Harfoots. And I'll talk about the fucking Harfoots in a minute because they are fucking insufferable in this series. And acted terribly again as well. But when we see fireworks, at least from what we've seen in the film so far, we've got the Fellowship of the Ring, and then we've got the extended edition of An Unexpected Journey, where you've got the firework display in the Shire, and you've got all these wonderful fireworks that are being let off by Gandalf. So when we saw all these fireworks, and these fireworks are like way the fuck over the top as well. There was like a butterfly one, and there was all the gimmicky fireworks, but they were all in the sky at once. And I thought, oh, okay, we're going to the Harfoots because they talk about some kind of festival, some kind of thing that they're celebrating. And I thought, okay, we're going back to those. But I think the fireworks were coming from Linden. And I don't know, like, I could be wrong, but letting off fireworks to me doesn't seem very much like an Elvish celebration. It feels like a Hobbity one. And I know that some of these fireworks, I think, were created by dwarves, if I remember rightly. I know that they're at least delivered by dwarves in the Fellowship of the Ring book, but I can't remember if they were made by them. But yeah, elves letting off fireworks and stuff doesn't really seem like their way of celebrating because they're very much just of the earth, aren't they? And feasting and if they're the dark elves or the Cinderin elves, well, even Thranduil, likes to drink. He has a party in the middle of Mirkwood and everything, doesn't he? That seems more like an Elvish celebration than fireworks. That's a really small point, and that's me nitpicking, but it just didn't feel akin to the elves to me. But here's where someone hits me with a quote from one of the books where it says that, oh, these fireworks were made by the finest elven smithcrafts or something like that. Will says, yeah, it's basically a fan fiction. Only the first minutes with the light of the two trees of Valinor are directly adapted from Tolkien's work, and it was the only enjoyable moment of the series. I said exactly the same thing. That is my favorite shot of the whole first 2 episodes so far. But I would have liked, me and Nikki would have liked a silhouette of an Ungoliant when you see the trees being swallowed up. But maybe it's because they don't have the rights to Ungoliant. I didn't think of that. I think Ungoliant is mentioned though in the appendices of the Lord of the Rings, so they probably could have still got away with it. But adapting Tolkien faithfully is difficult, isn't it? It's so much hard work. Like, we'd rather just right. Let's get on to the Harfoots. We need to talk about the Harfoots. So we've got Nori, and I know that she's got like a full name. It's not like I forgot what her fucking name is. Basically, it's female Frodo, isn't it? Let's be honest. It's female Frodo and female Sam. But she calls herself Nori, and I keep thinking of the dwarf from Thorin's company from the Hobbit films, who was called Nori, and spoken exactly the same way as well. Nori. It's just exactly the same. These Harfoots are fucking insufferable. I've mentioned it before, and I'm not going to harp on it because I feel like a broken record at this whole thing. Based on European law and everything like that, you would not have had a multicultural race of hobbits or elves or dwarves. It just wouldn't have happened. And if you do introduce that in the concept of, inclusivity and being more progressive and, projecting your own message and 2022 politics on it in media onto Lord of the Rings, it now kind of deconstructs the world. And now I'm thinking, well, how did we get to a multicultural group of hobbits and everything like that. And they don't explain it because they feel like they don't need to explain it. But Tolkien was meticulous with his world creation and the geography of it and the layout of it and the different races and different provinces. Everything made sense. It was like a fully fleshed out world and was written to be, like a medieval kind of mythology for England, European lore. That's what it was. That's predominantly what it was. So by doing this now, I'm looking at this thinking, well, did some of the hobbits venture into Harad? Did people from Harad come to the Shire and not the Shire, but to the Harfoots and boink a hobbit? Is that what happened? Is that how? It makes me question all these things because it breaks the geography of the world. And that is the strength of what Tolkien's mythology was. It was the strength and how cohesive the world was and how real the legendarium was that he created in terms of this mythology. And as I say, people think, oh, you don't need to explain this now, but you do. In the context of this, you do. It's the same way if we flip the tables on this one, because if you ever speak out against this now, you're immediately branded as an ist and a phobe. Let's flip the tables on this. Let's say someone was going to say, we're going to adapt Japanese mythology. We're going to take all of the wealth of Japanese mythology and we're going to turn it into a series of films or a TV show. But in terms of Japan, we're also going to have a multicultural cast. We're going to have a bunch of Caucasian actors in there, and they're just going to be there. They're just going to be, why can't we have Caucasian Asians, Caucasian Asians in our Japanese mythology series? And it's like, no, I would be pissed off if they put Caucasian people in something that was directly adapting Japanese mythology. I'd want a fully Japanese cast in the Japanese language. Thank you very much. Same thing, I always throw this as an example as well in modern culture as well. Black Panther. In Black Panther 2, when we go to Wakanda, I want that to be just a whole, cast of black actors. Of course I do, because it's, it's like it's an African province. It's, culturally important and everything like that. I don't want to see like a random, a white Wakandan just shows up and you just go, oh yeah, well, why can't we? Why can't we do that? They were there the whole time. It's a multicultural Wakanda. I'd be pissed off about that too. I'll be like, no, because it breaks it. My point is, it has to be consistent with the world and the fiction that you are creating, with the world that you are presenting in the Legendarium. It has to be consistent with that. And if anything was whitewashed like that, I would be pissed, because that would take me out of it. That would take me out of this mythological world that you are creating and you're presenting, and the world building that you're trying to get across with that. And everyone else would lose their fucking shit if you were doing a Japanese mythology series and you just cast white actors in there and didn't have, or had even a diverse cast in there. They'd be complaining, saying that this should be, we need to gatekeep. This needs to be Japanese. And I agree with that. It should be. So why can't we do it the other way around? This was written as a European mythology. Why can't they stay true to that? Or we can't do. Is it like a sense of white guilt or something? Like, I don't know what it is, but apparently you can't do that. We can't stay true to the roots that this is, a European law steeped in, Germanic law and Irish law and everything like that, and was written to be in mythology. Written of the time as well. It's kind of written as a medieval almost kind of legendarium, where it is multicultural. That's the thing. Middle-earth is very multicultural, but things mean things, and that it is multicultural, but they're all kind of partitioned off in their own lands and everything like that. That's just how the legendarium was written. That is how the world was created, and apparently now that's wrong. We can't do that. And I've made this argument loads, and I feel like I have to, because everyone always jumps on the ist and the phobe argument because they're so fucking narrow-minded, and that's their one scapegoat argument that they have. There were ample opportunities in this series where they could have done that. And I wish they had have done that. I would have loved to have seen the lands of Harad and the deserts of Rune and the Corsairs and everything like that. Would have loved to have seen that, because Tolkien only kind of vaguely hints at some of those lands in the books, and we never really get like a full vivid picture of those lands. Whenever I'm presented with a map of Middle-earth, those are always the lands that I'm most fascinated about, because I want to know more about these lands. I want to know about the cities there and the provinces and the peoples and the different races and everything. And this show could have done that. If this show was going to fan fiction a whole bunch of stuff, and let's say they wanted to meet some kind of diversity quota with it, there was ample opportunity where they could have done that and stayed true to the source material and still been intriguing. Fan fiction, because, you know, a lot of that stuff isn't on page, but it was their chance where they could have been creative and got into some of that, and they haven't. They've chose to go for the common denominator. And now we have, you know, diverse elves and diverse dwarves and diverse hobbits. And you try and think about it and you try and break it down. And they don't want you to, because if you try and break it down or question it, you're a racist. But if you try to question it in sense of the world building, you know, it just completely dismantles the world to me and just takes me out of it. Especially when, as well, you've got diverse, what was his name? Arondir, who's got a fucking weave haircut. It's like, what are we actually doing right now? This is just, yeah. Anyway, I've talked about that bit. We've got Fortnite. Fortnite Epic Games YT says Lord of the Rings Episode 3, September the 9th, 2022. Is the date true? Well, I'm expecting it will just be a week from today, won't it? Yeah, which will be the 9th. Yeah, so I'll post this at the end, but expect my next review next week at the same time, 11 p.m. British Standard Time, and we'll talk about Episode 3. So actually, we just left off on Arondir. My next note is that Arondir is boring as fuck. Now, I can't take credit for this comparison, but as soon as this was mentioned on another channel that I'm subscribed to, I can't unsee it now, and seeing it in context of the episode, it absolutely is. I think this was the Critical Drinker who mentioned this on a live stream. He says that Arondir as a character feels more like Grey Worm from Game of Thrones, and as soon as he said that, I thought that's absolutely perfect comparison, because he does. Grey Worm was this just very emotionless character by design, and Arondir is exactly like that as well. There's just no personality to him. There's no cool factor. Again, the whole, it's just impossible in terms of the lore. Some of his dialogue as well is terrible. I think there's a line where, I think it's where they go to it's that village, isn't it, that's been completely destroyed. It's like a hole in the ground, and he's like, I must go into that hole in the ground or something. And someone says, but you don't know what's in there. And he goes, yes, that is why I must go, or something like that. And it's just really shitty dialogue like that. And the love story as well. The love story. So we go to, I think is it the Ravanian? I think we go to the lands of men, essentially. And everyone there is really unkempt and you know, dirty and filthy and lived in and kind of grotty. Apart from the one woman who lives there with her son, who's absolutely immaculate, you know, beautiful, absolutely stunning, and, you know, makeup and everything, and looks absolutely gorgeous, which just feels really random in terms of, if you think about Rohan in the Two Towers and the civilians of Rohan, all of them had that kind, you know, straw-colored hair. Obviously, you know, the kind of Anglo-Saxon influences that Tolkien had from the lands of Rohan. You know, and it was all straw-like, and it was kind of matted, and none of them were made up or anything like that. And that's what it should be like, you know, in the lands of men. Like, keep it consistent. And of course, now we've got a love story between Arondir and this woman. And this is what annoys me, because romance between elves and men isn't commonplace, or elves and other races. You know, if we're going with Peter Jackson's Hobbit trilogy, where you had the terrible love triangle thing with Legolas, Tauriel, and Killy, it's not commonplace. And this shit keeps trying to make it commonplace. The only examples that you can really go to are Beren and Luthien, and then by design, Aragorn and Arwen is kind of like a almost a they're not reincarnated, they're descendants of, but the story itself is almost like a continuation of that was established with Beren and Luthien and sort of like brought to the fold again through Aragorn and Arwen. That's kind of it, you know. Like, there might be another example. I can't really think of one right now, but there might be a third example, but it's not commonplace, and this just wouldn't happen. And the thing is as well, like, as a love story, it just looks like they're down to fuck. There's no kind of genuine connection there. You know, it's this really trite stuff. There's modern verbiage in the series as well. I think some of the hobbits use the word okay, and it's just, you know, which is quite a modern word, and it's just that would never be in that would never be in Tolkien. You know, when this is set, like there's a poetry to the words, and Tolkien was a fucking professor of language and the history of words, and you wouldn't have okay like an abbreviation like that. And it's just shit like that just really takes me out of this show. It just lacks all of the poetry that Tolkien added into his words, and yeah. Lord Oakenshield says some shots in Khazad-dûm were actually pretty good. Prince Durin the Fourth looked like a dwarf from Jackson's films, and his actor was one of the only good actors of the series. I would agree with that. If I was going to kind of pinpoint something in the series that I think is actually probably the best stuff that we were shown, it is the stuff at Khazad-dûm, although I do still have some problems with it, which we'll get onto in just a second. But yeah, I think if I was going to pick anything, certainly the Khazad-dûm stuff and the Dwarven stuff was the stuff that I gravitated towards the most. It's a shame Durin the Fourth's actor had to play in such a shit show. He would have been great playing one of the dwarves in the Hobbit. Yes. Yeah, he had the accent down. He had the mannerisms. Yeah, it's a shame, isn't it? Gil-Galad is also okay, but Celebrimbor looks like an old man. Makes no sense. It's hilarious. We're going to get onto that because that's one of my... Yeah. Just the complete disregard for the fucking source material. It's just absolutely atrocious. Okay, yeah, which actually brings us on to Linden. So this is a good segue. I'm going to be all over the place, but again, episode 1 and 2 are all over the place with its characters as well. So we go to Linden, and we're introduced to Gil-Galad, and I've got on record before saying the actual appearance of the character is probably one that I'm actually okay with. You know, if you showed me a shot of him and go, that's Gil-Galad, I'd be like, yeah, okay, that checks out. I thought the actor did a pretty okay job as well. The way he was delivering the lines really reminded me of Lee Pace, character of Thranduil in The Hobbit. A lot of the lines seemed very similar to ones from the movies, especially the prologue with Galadriel. There was a line, and I forget what it was in the show now, but it felt like, you know, like history became legend, legend became myth from the film. And it felt like a play on that a little bit. The way it was delivered, the cadence of it, and how they changed the line felt very much similar to that. And there were a few lines here and there that I noticed that seemed very much from the movies, or like a play on the movies. My problem is with Gil-Galad is that he's just a fucking idiot in this series. Like the complete, look how they massacred my boy with Gil-Galad. His attitude is that, you know, Galadriel says that Sauron is returning, and he's like, yeah, no, he's not. We don't have evidence of this. And then he says something which just like makes no sense at all. And he just says that I think it's Gil-Galad who says this, or it could be Elrond, I forget. I think it's Gil-Galad though. He says to Galadriel, because she's causing a stir, you know, she's kind of a vigilante, she's going off and doing her own things. And he says to her, maybe by you looking for Sauron, by you actually trying to do something about it and investigate it, by you kind of stirring the pot, maybe that draws evil into the world because you're looking for it. So if you stop looking for Sauron, he's just going to go away and evil won't be there. I'm like, that is fucking... This is coming from the mouth of Gil-Galad. Would never fucking happen. Would never fucking happen. So he just wants to turn a blind eye to it. He says like, oh, if we go looking for evil, that's when Sauron will show himself. But if we turn our heads, turn the other cheek, it's not going to happen. So he's just completely apathetic towards it all. At least, you know, like Thranduil in the movies, at least, you know, Thranduil is completely different in the Hobbit book to what he is in the movie. But there was a consistency there. It was all about self-preservation. It's just, you know, I'm going to remain apathetic to the troubles of the world. And if Sauron, the necromancer, and orcs want to ravage other lands, you know, as he says in the movies, other lands are not my concern. As long as we're protected and, you know, ours are taken care of within the woodland realm, we will endure because we're immortal and we're awesome like that. So there's at least a consistency to his argument, whereas this one it's not any kind of self-preservation, like we shouldn't go looking for Sauron because that could bring evil to our own lands and we don't want to stir the pot. This is just genuine, like, if we don't go looking for evil, it won't happen, which is completely ridiculous. And anyway, Gil-Galad basically says to Galadriel, he's like, you're a troublemaker. I'm gonna grant you the honor of sending you into the West with a bunch of other elves that are given this high honor of sailing into the West. And this is right around the time where we get that conversation between Elrond and Galadriel, and Elrond says like, you're my best friend, or you're my friend or something. I was like, no, she's not. She's your fucking mother-in-law. She's your kin. Also, the completely miscast, I thought, Elrond. And that's probably not aided by the way visually he looks as well. I think the actor's fine. You know, he played an all right young Ned Stark as well. But as a young, if it's meant to be tying into the movies, and these are meant to be these characters earlier on, like nothing like Hugo Weaving. The way he acts it is nothing like Hugo Weaving. And again, they just completely get the character of Elrond totally wrong. We'll talk about that when we get to the second episode with the whole dwarven stuff, because that's just way out of character for Elrond. So they basically say, right, we're shipping you off to the west because you're a troublemaker, Galadriel. We need to send you away. So she gets on the ship, and from the whole journey on the ship, they all stand in formation with their swords. Like they're just gonna keep that pose all the way into the west. It's like hundreds of miles on that boat. Like, go get some refreshments, go chat to people. Why have you got to stand like this? Like I have been chosen kind of thing. And that's what it feels like as well. We may as well talk about that as well. So the fucking apparently to get into the west, into Valinor, it's like this giant light portal. It's not just this land that's across the horizon, across the sunset. It's like an actual magical portal that goes like, it like opens up like a giant light vagina that accepts you into it and kind of like absorbs you into this world, which is not at all what I think Tolkien intended for the West to be. And the light's almost upon Galadriel. It's almost consuming her. She's almost going into the West. And then she decides, no, this isn't the life for me. I need to be more proactive. And she jumps off the fucking ship into the middle of the Sundering Seas. This is an ocean, by the way, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles away from shore. And her plan is to jump into the water and swim. Like, okay, I don't know. We're going to Google this right now. How far has a human swam in... this is me just typing in on Google. Who holds the record for the longest unassisted marathon? Marathon swim. Okay. So there was Velko, it's a Croatian swimmer, 139.8 miles swim across the Adriatic Sea in Italy in 2006. Okay, so let's just say 150 miles. And let's say an elf gets like a little bit more mileage maybe and can swim a little bit more at a push. So let's give her like 150 miles, shall we? Like 160 miles or something like that. Because they've got a bit more vitality to them maybe. As far as I'm aware, it's like hundreds and hundreds of miles to the shore. And she's just going to swim from literally the utmost west all the way back to Middle Earth. What kind of plan's that? That's fucking terrible. But Galadriel's amazing at everything, so maybe she can swim that entire distance. And there's also a sense of timing with this thing as well. This comes into it more in episode 2. The jumps in geography between people getting to places, namely Celebrimbor and Elrond walking from Eregion all the way to Khazad-dûm in seemingly no time at all. But then, which would take months, which would take weeks and weeks and weeks, if not months. Because we see how far it is on the map. It does like this camera pan from one location to the next, and then it just cuts and they're immediately at that location. But then we cut back to the other characters and no time has passed at all. And it's like happening at the same time or like the next day or something like that. So the whole span of time and geography and everything is just completely fucked. So she's in the water. I don't know how long they've been sailing for. I don't know how long she's swimming for or been in the water. There's no sense of her being dehydrated or anything like that. So fuck it. I don't know how long the time frame is of this thing. It's right around this time as well that we're introduced to, I've got it in my notes, Old Man Celebrimbor. Boy, did, hang on. Sorry, we've got Mythic Dawn here. Good to see you, dude. Did the Lord get the rings? A good question for another time. Yeah, in my notes here, I've got Old Man Celebrimbor. I don't know how they could have fucked. This is the most fucked up casting. Oh, I don't know. There's a lot of fucked up casting, actually, now I think about it, or fucked up direction, at least. This is one of the worst bits of casting in the entire show. I don't know what the fuck they were thinking. Considering this is meant to be the descendant of Fëanor, was Fëanor his grandfather, if I remember rightly, who had distinct raven-coloured hair, black hair, which is a prominent trait in his family. And he doesn't have that. The age is completely fucked up as well. Fëanor was hitting on Galadriel back in the day. He was the one who wanted... I think he wanted 3 strands of her hair, didn't he? I think was that back then as well. Or he wanted to. I'm trying to remember. There was a tie to her hair. Like Gimli asking for 3 strands of her hair, and I know it was to do with the Silmarils. And I can't remember if did Fëanor ask Galadriel for permission to refill to fill the Silmarils with the light of the 2 trees of Valinor. Or was it something to do? I think he was attracted to her, though. I think he made a pass at her and she turned him down, and that kind of really pissed him off. So the fact that Celebrimbor's this old just makes no sense. And if you Google image anything about Celebrimbor, even from the video games, they've got the design bang on point. He's meant to be Galadriel's age, pretty much. Well, not Galadriel's age, but, just visually he's meant to look like her. He's not meant to be an old fucking man, because that just completely screws up how elves age, because Galadriel's meant to be super old, way older than Celebrimbor, but visually he looks way older. So now it just doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense. It's the worst bit of casting in the whole show, I would say. I've talked about the light vagina of Valinor. And then, with Celebrimbor, it's basically setting up the Rings of Power, isn't it? He just says that he wants to create the biggest forge the world has ever seen in order for him to craft more impressive things. He talks about Fëanor's hammer and says that Fëanor created the Silmarils, which literally reduced Morgoth to tears at looking into their beauty. And he wants to create something like that. He wants to leave a legacy as well. And he wants to create something which we all know is going to be the Rings of Power. And he and Elrond jet off to Khazad-dûm to converse with the dwarves. Because apparently Elrond is best friends with Durin. Like, that's not in the source material. Like, Elrond isn't friends with dwarves. If anything, the diplomat here would be Galadriel. Or even that, like, even if you do just keep it to like Celebrimbor and Elrond, Celebrimbor was the one who was friends with the dwarves, not Elrond. So if anything, the role should have been switched. It's fucked. We'll get onto that when we talk about episode 2, because we're still on a Shadow of the Past right now. We're almost done though. Oh yeah, then we've got the comet in the sky. I've got a weird note here, and this is going to be a topic on the music as well. So when I heard that Howard Shore was returning to do the music, I was over the moon, because I thought, if this show does suck, at least the music will be good. And then I think they confirmed that Bear McCreary was doing the music as well, whose soundtracks I've absolutely loved, especially his soundtrack to the recent God of War game. I say recent God of War, the last God of War game. We've got God of War 2 coming out this year, but his soundtrack to that was phenomenal. He's done a whole bunch of other films as well. Really great music. So I thought at least it's going to sound good. With the exception of maybe one song that kind of played in Khazad-dûm, infinitely forgettable. Just blends into the background. Doesn't have that grandiose feel to it like it does with Lord of the Rings. The orchestra feels a lot more pared down. I don't know if anyone else had that as well, because I've seen some people mix. I've seen some people really praise the music in this thing. For me, it just did absolutely nothing for me. And maybe it'll be interesting to see how the soundtrack develops, maybe across the series, but we're 2 episodes in and the music's just infinitely forgettable to me. And the note that I've got here on my phone, I've got, when the comet was in the sky, the music sounded like the beginning of This Is Halloween from Nightmare Before Christmas. If you know that song, you know what I'm talking about. I don't know. It just sounded like it to me. It's a weird note, but maybe people didn't notice that. So we've got... I've written Terminator Meteor Man because it reminds me of how the Terminators arrived to Earth. You know how, you get like the lightning crackle kind of thing, and then this like plasma sphere thing appears, which laser cuts into the earth, and it's like scorched earth, and things are on fire, and you've got like the naked dude in the middle who's kind of in a pose. Reminds me of Terminator. So we've got Meteor Man, who's our wizard for the series. We don't know who it is yet. I think there's probably a strong case that it's going to be Gandalf, especially with some of the things we see in... I don't know if it was in this episode or if it was in episode 2. When he starts shouting and screaming, the trees kind of like bend inwards and everything goes a lot darker. And it's just, it's like the Bilbo Baggins, do not take me for some conjurer of cheap tricks. I'm not trying to rob you. I'm trying to help you. It's like that scene, right, where everything goes dark, and of course they recreated that in the Hobbit films, didn't they? When he's like, "If I say Bilbo Baggins is a burglar, then a burglar he is." It's the same kind of thing. You've also got shit there with like the fireflies, and he's kind of, it looks like fire, and Gandalf's all about that kind of stuff. They're kind of playing it like a whole E.T. kind of thing, E.T. Iron Giant, where kids find this alien creature that showed up and they've got to keep it a secret, but they're also fascinated by it and they're going to create like a bond with it. Bath Time with Vaughn says, all right, bruv, did you like it? No, I didn't. I really didn't. As a Tolkien adaptation, it's an absolute abortion. And just if you take Tolkien out of it and you just look at it as its own fantasy series, I just thought it was really boring, kind of directionless. None of the characters are compelling and written and acted terribly, in all honesty. There's a couple of nice shots, very few and far between, with some of the effects. Like in some shots, you can definitely see the money on the screen. Hey, dude, if you liked it, yeah, I'm not going to tear you down. I'm not going to ridicule you or anything like that. I'm just giving my 2 cents on this thing. I'm just giving my opinions on this thing, and I invite everyone else to do so. I'm not going to say that, oh, you're this and you're that just because you liked it. I'm never going to talk down to someone. Who am I to say what you can and can't like? So yeah, man, if you liked it, let me know what you liked about it though. Bath Time says the opening sequence was bollocks though. I mean, I wasn't keen on the opening in general. The stuff about I didn't mention this, like young Galadriel, like young girl Galadriel creating magical origami and sailing it, and then you've got these kids that are like picking on her, and then she like fucking decks one. She's like on top of him, like ready to like punch him in the face and like knock him the fuck out. So all of that shit, like, I didn't really care for. That felt very cheap, but certain shots, like as I mentioned, like the 2 trees of Valinor, I actually thought were pretty good shots. The shot of the dragon attacking the eagle was kind of cool to see. I liked the design of Sauron when we saw him in his fortress and he's kind of like holding that staff thing that he's got. It looked very imposing and a cool kind of still. But beyond that, that was kind of it with the opening scene for me. It was just kind of like a few shots that I thought looked pretty okay. Why is an immortal elf telling his sister he won't always be around? I guess you could infer that he's going to go off and probably go to battle or venture off or something. Like, she's going to have to find her own way. I guess you can read that in both ways, I suppose. Bath Time says, I like the themes of mortality, etc. I thought Celebrimbor was really close to the source material. Ooh, okay. And Brother Elf and his storyline was much more interesting than I expected. I disagree with you on the Celebrimbor thing. We were just talking about that actually before you signed in, about how the age of Celebrimbor is way off. They've casted like I've called him Old Man Celebrimbor. The ages just don't line up at all, considering that Galadriel is meant to be way, way older than Celebrimbor. Celebrimbor's grandfather, Fëanor, actually hit on Galadriel and was romantically interested in Galadriel. So if anything, Galadriel should look like an older woman, if we're going by that. The maturity of the elves is just completely fucked in this show. But personally for me, like, obviously Celebrimbor needs to be in the show, but I think they should have gone with a much younger actor. And one that visually just resembles Celebrimbor a lot more as well. The black hair and, the long black hair that we see. But yeah, right. Anyway, yeah, Terminator Man, as I mentioned, it seems like they're doing some kind of like ET Iron Giant thing where they're going to form a bond with this thing. Apparently, again, from like a lot of the YouTube channels I'm subscribed to and people that have had like inside information into it, or have seen leaks about it, apparently they don't give away Meteor Man's name in this season, and that's going to be saved until season 2 or 3, I think they said. The point is, he doesn't get revealed. He doesn't get named in this season. So they say. They could be wrong. To which case I'm like, well, to me, I think it's clearly Gandalf. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I think it's Gandalf. But in a show that's trying to be as nostalgic as possible, you know, throwing like Galadriel and Elrond and Khazad-dûm and Balrogs and Sauron, you know, and all these things into it, why wouldn't they like want to just, you know, shoot their bolt and just go, oh yeah, it's Gandalf, you know, Gandalf's in the show, and just name drop Gandalfs to get more people in? I don't know why they're keeping that a secret, and that kind of tells me, do they have other plans? Like, is it Gandalf? Because if it was Gandalf, I feel like they would just come right out and say it right off the bat, which kind of infers to me that maybe it's not going to be Gandalf, but then who else can it be? Is it going to be one of the other wizards? Is it going to be Radagast? Is it going to be Saruman? Like, it's very, very weird. And if it is Gandalf, if it is one of the wizards, if it's any of the Astari, crash landing to Earth on a meteor is absolutely ridiculous. And that is not how the wizards showed up to Middle Earth. And in fact, like the Harfoots themselves, they shouldn't be showing up at all until the beginning of the Third Age. That's when hobbits started first emerging, and that's when the Astari showed up, it was precisely to counteract Sauron from ever rising up again, and they were sent to Middle Earth, all 5 of them. I think there's 2 accounts. I think there's some that say that the Blue Wizards arrived first with Saruman, and then Radagast and Gandalf followed afterwards, and then some say that all 5 showed up at the same time. But the point is, it wasn't until the beginning of the Third Age. But, you know, fuck me, right, if we're going to stay true to source material. Bath Times says, yeah, you know, the timeline's going to be all over the place, but I think for a grandson of Fëanor with his rep, they need to make him older. Not necessarily. I mean, they're making Galadriel like this uber incredible, amazing at everything, perfect woman, and she's very young. Like, visually on screen, she's very young. So no, I think you can get away with someone having, you know, like prowess, or maybe a grandson wanting to, maybe like a Kylo Ren kind of thing, you know, like a grandson that wants to live up to his grandfather's exploits. I think you can still get away with that. Just, you know, good writing, good depiction. But I'm still 100% hoping Bronwyn, or whatever she's called, becomes a Nazgul. Oh God, no! No. They were 9 kings of men. Why would she become an Nazgul? Is Bronwyn's the mom, right? And then I forgot the name of the kid who picks up that Morgul sword, which I'm assuming is going to be Sauron's sword. And then by the end of the episode, I think it's at the end of episode 2, his blood seeps into the sword, which kind of rejuvenates it. You not see the rune he carved. Yeah, it was like the Eye of Sauron or some shit, wasn't it? Fuck me, I don't know what's going on with that, but if it becomes a Nazgul, then that's just terrible. Literally, the line from Fellowship of the Ring: "They were once men, great kings of men, and Sauron the Deceiver gave to them 9 rings of power. Blinded by their greed, they took them without question, one by one, falling into the darkness." Yeah, they were once men, but I guess now Nazgul can identify with however they want to be, right? Fuck me, I don't know. Sure, yeah, make them female, make them whatever you want. I don't care anymore. Oh God. Lord Oakenshield says the Harfoots in this shit look like the Lost Boys from P. Yes, 100%. Yeah, it looks like the Lost Boys from Hook. And the acting was so bad, and their voices, like the accents they were trying to put on as well. Hobbits are meant to be like these endearing creatures, and just they really weren't. Every time we cut to them, they were just really obnoxious and annoying. And yeah, just the designs for them and everything. It's just, yeah, I just really didn't like them. With hearts bigger than our feet. With hearts bigger than that line wasn't in these 2 episodes, and how that was filmed with like the actor was like addressing the camera like a documentary, wasn't it? It's almost like someone was like, so I don't know what his name. What's your take on Harfoots? Puts the microphone in his face. We have hearts bigger than our feet, and he's looking directly into the camera. It's, if that was just filmed for the trailer, then that's a really weird choice. If that is going to show up in the show, that's going to be hilarious, because that is a terrible line. And the thing is as well, like, they wouldn't, like, would a Harfoot feel like they have big feet? Surely they just think that we have normal sized feet for the race that we are, and not necessarily big feet. I don't know. It's weird. Bath Time says, yes, bro, because she can't be with the elf because she's mortal, so she's going to become a wraith for the dramatic irony. Oh, God. Oh, God, that's so fucking dumb. I think you might be right. That actually wouldn't surprise me if they do some shit like that. He says, no, he carved an inverted version of the rune Gandalf card on Bag End in The Hobbit. So are we talking about when a Meteor Man crash landed to Earth and he's like writing all the runes? I did actually notice that one. It's like the backwards capital F, isn't it? I think if that's the one you're referring to. I saw Meteor Man draw that one, but I didn't see Bronwyn or Bronwyn's son draw that one. Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, you're talking about, yeah, no, that's right. And again, that's another thing that could be a link to Gandalf is drawing those runes and everything. I can't believe I'm calling him Meteor Man, but it's just there's a man that crash lands to Middle Earth in a meteor in this thing. Like, it's so fucking dumb. It's so dumb. Anyway, right, that'll take care of that one. Now we're on to Adrift, episode 2. And I'm coming up to an hour and a half, so I need to rattle through this quickly because I've got work in the morning. And but I love this. I love talking with you people. You know, this is great. I love connecting with you and actually having a conversation about it. This is great. Okay, so we're on to Adrift now, episode 2. My first note is Galadriel starts swimming in the middle of the fucking ocean. I mentioned this last time. Her jumping off and just absolutely ridiculous. Like, what was she trying to prove? Did she think she was going to be able to swim the whole distance back? Absolutely ridiculous. Bath Time says they're going to call him Aloran and use the loophole from Gandalf the White not remembering his past life in Middle-earth. That's a great point, actually. I did think that when I was watching it, and I thought, oh, they've kind of got this like mute kind of weirdo that shows up who can't talk, and he's like, oh, me Tarzan, you Jane kind of thing. They're doing like slapstick shit as well, where he's in the wheelbarrow and they let him go and he starts rolling down the hill. Just really dumb shit like that. He's eating snails in the shells. It's like disgusting. And yeah, the fact I was kind of thinking, well, Aloran would know his task. He would know why he's there in Middle Earth, because he was sent specifically with that job to help the free peoples of Middle Earth and stop Sauron. So he would show up with that knowledge. He would. And maybe that's what he's referring to when he's doing all of the runes. He's trying to warn that Sauron's returning or something like that. I can't remember which scenes that scene was edited with, because if it's to do with like the Morgul blade and stuff that was clearly Sauron's sword and the Eye of Sauron and everything, then there's probably a lot of truth to that. I don't know. I just naturally assumed that Aloran would show up alongside all the other Astari with, you know, being able to communicate. They put on the guise because they're like angelic beings, aren't they? They put on the guise of old men when they show up, but they should still be able to communicate with people. When Gandalf the White shows up, he doesn't lose his ability to speak. He kind of has like a vague knowledge of his past life, like he's remembering. It's like he's trying to remember a half-remembered dream or something like that. If we go in with the Inception comparison there. It's like trying to wake up and remember the dream that you've had, and you remember bits and pieces and you try and put it together, but you can still fucking talk. So I feel like Aloran should be able to speak. But I did think that and thought that maybe it is because, you know, he's just come to Middle Earth, perhaps. And he says, unless they change the law again, because Lauren didn't want to go to Middle Earth, and the Valar just popped him on a rocket and booted him into orbit. It's so weird talking about Lord of the Rings stuff like this, though, isn't it? Like popped him on a rocket and booted him into orbit. Yeah, he was hesitant to go, I think, because he doubted himself, didn't he? He doubted what he could contribute. And then, you know, it was with oh god, who was the one who sent him and said, like, no, you're going with purpose? There was someone who really championed the decision to send him. I'm gonna have to read the submarine again. Okay, let's continue with the episode anyway. I didn't like all the stuff with Meteor Man, though, like the way it was acted and like the slapstick comedy and the like like talking in grunts and stuff. Like, it just didn't fly with me. The whole concept of someone crash landing to Middle Earth on a meteor, like, that just really took me out of it and just seemed very un-Tolkien to me. Well, the whole series feels very un-Tolkien, so, you know, that's not saying much. I've put that the acting feels very sort of like amateur dramatic. It's very amdram. It's just not compelling. I don't really believe any of the characters. I don't think any are particularly well acted. Maybe with the exception of the guy who we mentioned who plays Prince Durin in Khazad-dûm. I thought he was actually pretty okay. But none of it considering this is like the most expensive TV show ever, nothing about it feels like Middle Earth to me. From the aesthetic to the visual, and the thing is, like, it's shot in New Zealand for a lot of it, and some of those landscape shots were nice, and I could pick out some of the locations from what we've seen in like the Hobbit films and everything, but it just feels so un-Middle Earth, and it's just like the way that characters look and the costume design's fucking dreadful. Costume design's so bad. You look at the Lord of the Rings, and it's like you had people like eroding away their fingertips from making chainmail, and all the costumes looked functional and lived in and had a sense of culture and history to them, even in the artistry of the goddamn armor. And in this one, all the costumes just look so cheap. You've got none of that same level of artistry in it, as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, just the acting just isn't all that great to me. So far, there's a few, as I mentioned, there's a few ones here and there that are okay that I can sort of get behind, but Bath Time says, I reckon that Halbrand is a baddie based off his first words, which is something like, you could be anyone in disguise. Yeah, I think he's going to be Sauron. I'm pretty sure he's going to be, you know, he's the pretty boy of the show. He's going to try and have a thing with, I swear to God, if they try and do a thing with him and Galadriel, I swear to Christ. Because, you know, apparently Celebrimbor's dead, which makes no sense. So my guess is, right, apparently what I heard on the grapevine is that Celebrimbor's dead, and we get that information in episode 7 of this season. Galadriel says, I lost a brother and I lost a husband. We know that can't be possible, and the writers are going to have to find a way to fucking magic Celebrimbor back to life, because he's got to have a daughter with Galadriel, and which is Celebrian, who then marries Elrond, and then they have Arwen. Now, the thing is, if she's going to be born, if she's not born yet, and she's just like a little baby, and then you've got Elrond who eventually marries her, that's going to be like some Twilight shit where you've got is it Jacob who like imprints himself on the baby and wants to fuck a toddler, which is just disgusting and weird. I don't know how that made it into Twilight. It's going to be that kind of thing. So as far as I'm concerned, I think Celebrimbor was born 300 years into the Second Age. And this is what I was saying earlier. I don't know when in the Second Age this takes place, because they've just completely just condensed the Second Age, and it's all over the place. It's all fucking over the place. But yeah, no, I'm totally with you there, dude. I think Halbrand's going to turn out to be Sauron, because he's going to be the pretty boy. He's going to be the one that they want everyone to fancy. And then when it turns, you know, Sauron in fair form, and then when it turns out that he's actually Sauron all along, it's meant to be this big shocker. And Do you think it's going to end? You know, I've mentioned Michael Jackson a bunch of times in this one, actually. I could make a toddler joke there, but I'm not going to. I don't agree with that anyway. I love Michael Jackson, but is it going to be? Is the final shot of season 1 with Halbrand going to be like the ending of the Thriller music video, where he just turns around and his eyes go yellow, and it's going to be the Sauron cat eyes, and you're going to be like, oh shit. Bathtime says, I didn't mind how overly saturated it looked because of the marring of Morgoth, or however you spell it, so it looks worse the longer the ages go on. Well, overly saturated means more color in the frame, and to me that's something I didn't like about The Hobbit, was just how oversaturated it was, because it just looks really cheap and like kind of gaudy and tacky, and yeah. Sauron can't disguise himself as a human. Surely they won't go that far. Well, dude, they've changed everything else, haven't they? So Nazgul can be women now, apparently. Sauron can disguise himself as a human. Because Anatar, Lord of Gifts, is in elven form. He shows up as like this really beautiful elf. And, you know, there's obviously that quote from the Fellowship of the Ring book, isn't there, about a servant of the enemy would look fairer and feel fouler, which is just a great line. I love that line. It makes it into the extended edition of Fellowship movie as well, when he's talking about Aragorn. So yeah, he was an elf who kind of showed up and was like really overly friendly with everyone, but there was like an underlying thing to him, and Galadriel clocked it pretty quickly. She was like, this guy's bad news. And then it was after the destruction of the fall of Numenor, where he then, after that, couldn't take fair form again, and then fled to Mount Doom and started, building Barad-dûr and getting set up over there. Tell me, where is Meteor Man? For I much desire to speak with him. Oh, that's hopefully. Well, yeah, we need Celeborn in the show, don't we? We really need Celeborn in the show. But the thing is, if we have Celeborn in the show, he's a strong male who does battle and has a spouse in Galadriel, and we've got to make Galadriel the strong, independent woman that don't need no man in her life. So we can't have Celeborn in the show. He's going to be dead. Lord Oakenshield says the dwarves' guards with their helmets that look like masks are actually pretty cool. I remember there was a helmet like this in Third Age on PSU. Yes, there was. Yeah, no, you're totally right. Yeah, there was. I remember that now. Hadhod was the dwarf, wasn't it? I loved Hadhod. He was like my favorite. Hadhod and Elagos, I think it was, wasn't it? It was like the Aragorn knockoff kind of character, the Ranger. Those are my favorite 2 characters in that whole game. Love those characters. Yeah, and I think, don't they mention as well in the Silmarillion, and maybe you can help me out here, Lord Oakenshield, but they talk about dwarves having battle masks. I think I distinctly remember reading that in the Silmarillion somewhere. I think when the dwarves are fighting alongside Glaurung, and they kind of like hack at his foot, and it injures Glaurung, and then he flees, doesn't he? Because Glaurung hadn't come into full maturity, so his skin was kind of weak, and they managed to repel him. I think it mentions in there somewhere that the dwarves have got some kind of masks on their faces, like full face masks. I imagine them almost kind of like samurai masks that, have those faces on there. There's probably other examples that are more culturally appropriate to the dwarves in which they were based on. But I know that is like a legit design for helmets and masks. So yeah, no, I didn't have a problem with that. I thought that was pretty cool too. Lord Oakenshield says, and yes, the discount Aragorn is definitely going to be Sauron. It's not subtle at all. It's hilarious. Yeah. Unless they're going to do like what D&D did in Game of Thrones, where everyone just calls them out and immediately knows what the twist of the TV series is going to be. So they just subvert expectations at the last second. Could you imagine them doing that shit? Bath Time says, if they reveal Halbrand as Sauron, he walks off and the Morgoth armor comes on him. I must admit, just on the completely unrelated, well, it's not unrelated, I was really wanting to get a glimpse of Morgoth, especially when we kept getting those name drops to him at the beginning. I really wanted to see Morgoth depicted. Now, I would have much rather have seen Peter Jackson's depiction of what Morgoth would look like, but even then, just to get our first on-screen, first ever depiction of Morgoth on screen would have been pretty cool. Even if it was just a silhouette of like this big like evil demon thing, that would have been cool. Pathfinder says he's not an elf, he's a Maiar because the elves can see his unseen form. Oh, okay, that's fair enough. Yeah, I thought he was in like elven guise when he was Anatar, bringer of gifts. My bad. Okay, maybe that's what I'm remembering. Yeah, I just thought they said like he was elf-like or something like that, or he appeared among the elves. Lord Oakenshield says Hadhod, that's the dwarf's name. Great game. Yeah, I was talking about the Third Age earlier. I was like, if it's trying to have its cake and eat it too, though, isn't it? It's trying to be a parallel story happening at the same time as the Lord of the Rings. But then there are loads of moments in the game that immediately contradict the Lord of the Rings itself, namely where you fight on the Bridge of Khazad-dûm against the Balrog alongside Gandalf with your party, which is ridiculous. And then the final boss of the game just goes completely off the deep end, and you are standing on top of Barad-dûr fighting the Eye of Sauron itself. So I always think it's really funny in the film where, the ring is destroyed and Sauron goes crazy and ignites and explodes. But I'm like, Frodo didn't. I bet destroying that ring didn't do shit. The real heroes of the story are Berethor, Idriel, Hadhod, and Elagos. That was my party. That they were my four. There was the Rohirrim guy, wasn't there? Ao. I forgot what his name was. And then there was Morwen as well, who was like the Rohan woman with the two axes. I think that was the full party, if I remember. You literally fight the Eye of Sauron. So I was like, actually, it was them who depleted his health bar on top of the Tower of Barad-dûr and destroyed the enemy. The ring had nothing to do with it. The ring had fuck all to do with it. But then it shows cutscenes from the movie, and then it made me really sad at the end because the final boss is Sauron, as I said, and you're actually standing on top of the tower. And then when the ring is destroyed, it does the, like the huge explosion from the movie. And I was like, oh my God, they were all on top of that tower, so they're all dead. I like to think that maybe they had to like quickly run down or maybe there's an elevator or something to get them down, like to get out of there. But I'm with the tower collapsing as well. And then the whole ground caving in around Barad-dûr. I'm pretty sure they're all dead, which makes me really sad. But yeah, great game. I love the. I've still got my PS2 hooked up. I might fire up. I might do like a Lord of the Rings marathon of all the games. Like play the Hobbit game, play the Fellowship of the Ring game, Two Towers, Return of the King, Third Age. Never played War in the North though. I heard that's very good. Anyway, Lord of the Rings video game tangent there. Bath Time says I wanted to see Ungoliant and Calagon more than anything else. Yes. Yeah, I've taught those two creatures, Ungoliant and Calagon. Sorry, I think I've talked about in every single trailer reaction I have to Rings of Power and how much I'd love to see them on screen. Just incredible stuff to see Calagon, like, especially if you go with how big he is in the books as well. I know that's up for debate, and there's a lot of artistic depictions of Calagon that probably make him a little bit too big, but I like to think he was that big because that's just so goddamn cool. Talking about the Third Age game, Lord Oakenshield says, yes, the story of the game was ridiculous. I remember Berethor was a male Merisu. Yeah, he was. But it was fucking cool to play. Hadhod and Elagos were awesome. I loved Idriel, I think her name was, wasn't she? The elven woman. She was the mage. She was the healer. And there was a spell that you could put on someone where if they died, which happens a lot, because the difficulty curve in that game is ridiculous. If one of your characters died, they would immediately come back to life. So I was just using her to cast that spell on everyone. And then she had a finishing move, which was really cool. If I remember rightly, it was like the water horses from Fellowship of the Ring at the Bruinen. And she'd like send out this jet of water with the horses. I think that was her. Really cool. So, I'm so nostalgic for that game now. I really want to play it, dude. I would definitely watch you playing some Lord of the Rings games. Hey, I don't profess to be a good gamer. I do want to stress that. I am fucking terrible. And I would probably be getting my hair off. I'd be dying a lot. But yeah, I mean, I've never streamed a video game before. I've never done video game shit on the channel before. And I'd have to look at how to do that and capture something from my PS2 to my Mac. I don't really know how to do that. I don't know if there's an emulator for the game that I could play on my Mac. I don't know. So it's something I'd consider for the future. Yeah, I'd be down for doing that, certainly. There's some really cool movies. And actually, that could be a good gimmick, actually. I could tie in with the channel because, you know, it's all about movie reviews and everything. Maybe I could do movie tie-in games because there's some fantastic ones. Return of the King, Spider-Man 2. There's some fucking terrible ones. Mostly every other movie tie-in game, but I don't know. Maybe that could be a thing. Anyway, Battle for Middle-earth games are awesome, and Lord of the Rings Online is also great. So I've never actually played Battle for Middle-earth myself, but I've seen someone play Battle for Middle-earth 2, and it's fantastic. And it's the modded version as well, where they've like put in Silmarillion shit, and they've got Ancalagon the Black in there, and they've got loads of other characters as well in there. But yeah, bloody fantastic. Really, really good game. Never played Lord of the Rings Online. Sadly, I don't get much free time now to game. I really miss it. I've still got my PS4 hooked up. I've never bought a PS5. Because there's a shit ton of games I still haven't played on PS4. I have got nowhere near the mileage out of my PS4. And I've never really been a PC gamer or just computer gamer at all. I've always been a console gamer, and I'm just used to a controller. I can't do the arrow keys and, you know, WASD keys. I can't do it. But from what I've seen of Lotro, it looks really... it looks incredibly lore faithful. And it genuinely looks really good. On the subject of sort of video games, last thing I'll mention, because I need to get back to my notes on the show. Has anyone seen Ardacraft? They're recreating Middle-earth in Minecraft, block for block. I think it's a 1/58 scale of Middle-earth, and it's outstanding what they're creating in that game. So check out the YouTube channel Ardacraft. Go and support them over there as well. I think Nerd of the Rings did an interview with them as well, where they kind of showcased off a lot of the locations they've already built. Bloody fantastic stuff. It's genuinely like jaw dropping. So go and check that out. Anyway, Bath Time said, I thought we were going to see a mad history of the First Age with the Oath of Fëanor. Yeah, so that bit where they all raise their swords up, yeah, I thought that was going to be the Oath of Fëanor as well. The kinslaying and Eärendil. Yeah, we saw the burning of the ships as well. I thought that was going to be the whole business at Aqualonde, the kinslaying and Eärendil flying about, so I can finally see it compared to Sam versus Shelob. Yeah. Yeah, I was expecting that too. I thought episode 1, A Shadow of the Past, I thought that whole episode was going to be like a prologue episode to set the stage for where we are in the Second Age, but we only got like a few minutes, didn't we? Like 5 minutes of it, and it was really glossed over pretty quickly, which was a shame. Bath Time says, if you haven't tried Horizon Zero Dawn, it uses the same story structure as the Lord of the Rings. I've heard very good things about that, actually. I check it out on the PlayStation Store. I check it out on the PlayStation Store quite a lot. It looks very cheap. No, sorry, the game doesn't look very cheap. Sorry, I'm tired, dude. I'm tired. I've been waffling on for almost 2 hours. When I go on the PlayStation Store, it's always cheap. And I've always been tempted to download it, but I've got a shit ton of games downloaded on my system that I haven't played yet. I've downloaded the BioShock trilogy. I've got all of the Kingdom Hearts games. I've only ever played Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, so I've got all the rest to play. I've got all the Assassin's Creed games since the PS4, so Assassin's Creed Black Flag, Rogue, Unity, Syndicate, Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla. 7 Assassin's Creed games that I need to play that I've never played before. Dragon Quest 11, Spider-Man. The list goes on. There's so many I need to play. Bath Time says, like Jackson's Lord of the Rings has pretty mad deviations from the lore, but the prologue was absolutely amazing and the Rings of Power was awful, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, it took its time, didn't it? It was like and yeah, even Peter Jackson's prologue, it does skip over a lot of stuff. It truncates stuff, and it definitely does simplify stuff even in the prologue, but it has impact and it hooks you in straight away, and it gets across all the relevant information that we need to set up the story, its characters, Peter Jackson, when he handed the writing task over to Fran Walsh and Philippa Boynes, he said, right, within this prologue, I need to set up the creation of the rings, who the rings were given to, Sauron and the One Ring itself, the Battle of the Last Alliance. I need to establish Elendil and Isildur and Narsil, which is going to set up for Aragorn's character. I need to set up Gollum and the, Bilbo picking up the. I've got to all of that, and you've got to tell that in 7 pages. Go, and they did it. And there was actually loads of deleted scenes from that as well, which you can kind of find online, like B-roll shit. Gil-Galad had a lot more to do in the prologue. They filmed a death scene where Sauron sets him on fire, like grabs him by the throat and sets him on fire. There was loads of stuff with Gil-Galad, and unfortunately all we get now in the movie with Gil-Galad is like a quick 2-second shot where he stabs the spear into the orc. Okay, let's continue. Prince Durin. This is a problem to me. And again, a disregard for the source material. And I talked about this last time. There shouldn't be a Prince Durin. So the king at this time is King Durin III in the show. And we see him at the end of episode 2. The design of him is great. Looks like a dwarf. Don't have any problems there. We did mention this last time. I think it might have been you, Lord Oakenshield, that mentioned this actually. The crown seems very out of character for Lord Durin. It's kind of jagged and kind of unpolished gold. It doesn't look spectacular. And this is meant to be a race of people that pride themselves in their smithcraft and mining and the coveting, the mining and coveting and fashioning of precious materials and precious gems. And you would expect him to be the king, to be all decked out in all of his fineries and like a wonderful crown and everything like that. And it really isn't. It's like this terribly designed crown, which is weird. So he's the king at this point. There wouldn't be a Prince Durin. How the whole line of Durin thing works is that, to my knowledge, they're kind of reincarnated one to the other. So as one dies, when another Durin emerges, that would be the next Durin, like Durin the Fourth. Durin is like one of the most sacred dwarves in the whole lineage of the dwarves, from Durin the First, and then I think the final one is Durin the Seventh, if I remember rightly, which is, I'm trying to remember, I think it's Thorin the Third Stonehelm's son is Durin the Seventh, and he's like the last Durin, I think. I think he's like meant to bring balance to the force or something with the dwarves. I can't remember, but he's like this Jesus Christ like figure almost of the dwarves. And as one dies, one is reincarnated. So the fact that we've got a Durin the Third and a Prince Durin the Fourth makes no sense. Makes no sense at all, because it's like it's meant to be the same spirit. They believe it's the same spirit inhabiting each new Durin, so you wouldn't have two around at the same time. Not to mention, I've mentioned this already, but one of the trailers shows the Balrog. So the Balrog's going to make an appearance. There is a literal mystery box in this episode where they lift up this wooden crate and there's like this silvery glow. We've seen that kind of thing before. There was the necklace, the gems that belong to Thranduil's wife in the Hobbit films. In the books, you've got shit like the Nauglamir, which I think is what that necklace in the Hobbit films was based on anyway. You've got the Silmarils, although I think all of them are pretty much accounted for at this point, and have all been destroyed or, at the depths of the sea and fiery chasms or in the sky. So it's going to be Mithril. I think I've seen that on other channels as well that have insider information that within that crate, it's going to be Mithril, which is probably going to lead to the, delve too deep and too greedily. We've seen that there's a Balrog in there, so we're probably going to have a Balrog sequence, which again makes no sense because that's playing with the timeline. It was Durin the Sixth that was, to my knowledge, I think it was Durin the Sixth that was Durin's Bane, who mined too greedily and too deep and was killed by the Balrog, which is precisely why the Balrog is called Durin's Bane. That's Durin the Sixth. We're on the third and the fourth right now, so I don't know why we're getting the Balrog this early. Just because, it's nostalgic, isn't it? The Balrog's cool and people want to see it, so start clapping. Let's talk about... Okay, so Elrond and Celebrimbor decide to travel to Khazad-dûm and Elrond has a plan. He's going to try and curry favor with the dwarves because he has friendship with Prince Durin the Fourth, and he's going to try and talk him into it in helping out building this amazing furnace in Eregion. And as I say, the map pans ages away to Khazad-dûm from where Eregion is, and we then cut to the next scene, and they've already showed up there. There's no horses. They've fucking walked from Eregion to, and there's no people accompanying them or anything like that. It's just those two walk into Khazad-dûm, and they get to the door, and this guy's like basically says like, "What's the password?" or something like that. No, he doesn't say that. And he's like, "Oh, elves, yeah, no, we don't want anything to do with you," and slams the door. And then Elrond says, "I invoke the right of something or other." It's like this ancient dwarven custom, and the dwarves are immediately let open for him, and he walks in. And then they shut the door on Celebrimbor. So I'm thinking, what's Celebrimbor meant to do? Because Elrond says, like, I'm going to be like, give me a few days and I'll get him on my side. So what's Celebrimbor meant to do? Like, he can't walk home because that's fucking ages away, apparently, although they make it look like it's like their neighbors in the show. He's not allowed into Khazad-dûm, so is he just gonna like, oh, excuse me, it's like, is he just gonna chill outside for days at a time? Celebrimbor, who's meant to be the friend of dwarves, so if anything, he was the one who should have gone in. It's ridiculous. Elrond is a fucking military champion at this point in the book. Like he's like leading attacks on like orcs and shit. Like he's in the front lines of it. He's in the thick of it. So we get into Khazad-dûm, and I'll speak as I find some of the designs of Khazad-dûm were pretty cool. Verily, yes. Oh yes, verily. Very overly CGI'd. And as I said, like some of the compositing with Elrond walking along, where you've got the live action elements interacting with the CGI landscape, the compositing wasn't that great, and you can tell that it's just someone walking on like a blue screen or something. There's interesting things where they've got kind of like crops, but they're growing trees under the ground in Khazad-dûm, and that's really weird to me. The way they do it is, I guess there's like a crack at the top of the mountain, and they've got like a bunch of mirrors that they angle down to generate sunlight down there. I don't think that's what would have happened with Khazad-dûm. I don't think they would have been growing their own food like that down there. Maybe, I don't know. It just seems a little bit out of character, but that's just oh god. Oh, as a design, I guess it's cool. I guess it's fine. But okay, this whole thing. So this was so fucking childish. Prince Durin the Fourth is mad at Elrond because Elrond hasn't visited him in 20 years, and he's kind of like a petulant child here. He's like, you haven't paid me any attention in 20 years, and I'm mad at you because I thought we were friends, and you haven't said hello to me in 20 years, and since then I've been married and I've got kids, and you haven't called in to check. It's a blink. What does he say? 20 years is a blink of an eye for you. Again, that was another one of the lines that reminded me of the Hobbit films, where Thranduil says to Thorin, 100 years is a mere blink in the eye of an elf. I am patient. I can wait. It's reminded me of that line. And I'm thinking that 20 years isn't really a blink of an eye for a dwarf either. Actually, no, sorry. Sorry, it is a blink in an eye for a dwarf as well, because dwarves live a very long life. Dwarves live to like the age of 300. I can't remember how old Dian Ironfoot was when he died, but I'm pretty sure he was like old as shit. He was like well over 300, I think. I think he was like 320 something. Oh no, my bad. Okay, he was 252. He was 252. But even still, like, yeah, granted, comparatively a lot shorter to elves, I'll grant you that. But 20 years, like, we're all fucking busy. It's like, get over yourself. And he's mad at him, and he's really petulant, and the actor's great as Durin the Third. Like, I don't have a problem with the acting, but it's just the writing of the character just felt very childish and trite. Of course, around this point, we're introduced to Disa. It's a play on the name Dis, which is Thorin Oakenshield's sister. When he says "my sister's sons," his sister is Dis. I think she's the only named dwarven woman in the whole text. I think out of all the books. I mentioned it earlier. Not going to harp on it again. Absolutely impossible to have, diverse dwarf. There was a few in the crowd as well. I saw in Khazad-dûm. They kind of crammed them in there as well. But it's impossible. Nothing against the actress at all. Nothing against the actress at all. I did think that her Scottish accent was quite hit and miss, though, in parts, and the way that she played the character. She was quite a fun character, but she felt like she was playing it very pantomime to me. She wasn't as bad as I thought she was going to be from like the trailers where I saw, where she's like, "This is your kingdom." I thought she was going to have an American accent from that part in the trailer that I saw. She wasn't as bad as I thought she was going to be, but it's just a question of sort of like the logic of the world. Because now I'm thinking, well, how do we get multicultural dwarves? And then the whole lineage and history and just the geography of the world just kind of unravels to me. And there's the whole thing with Lord of the Rings. It's all about world building, meticulous world building, and everything has a history and everything has a logic to it. And that doesn't have a logic to it. She's got very, very mild sideburns. I did notice that. Granted, it's not a beard, but they are kind of like some very faint sideburns. It's hilarious, though, the actress just saying like, "Oh, it was so important that I take this role, and it's the most important role of a lifetime." And every word that comes out of her mouth in interviews, "I am playing the first dwarven woman on screen. It's the first time we've ever seen a dwarf woman on screen." I'm like, you haven't done your research, have you? Because you see female dwarves in the Hobbit films quite clearly in Dale, and they have beards. They have like really long, scraggly sideburns. So yeah, she ain't the first, dwarven woman on screen. There have been some in the Hobbit films. You just got to look for them. We have a lot of comments. We have a lot of comments, guys. Sorry, I had to make headway a little bit on the episode because I will need to take off in a minute because I've got to be up in less than 7 hours. Lord Oakenshield says most of the deviations Jackson's made on the Lord of the Rings were justified, like skipping Tom Bombadil at the Battle of Bywater. In this series, there's nothing left of Tolkien. Yeah, it's not Tolkien, and this is what really annoys me, because you're going to have loads of people watching this show that are just ignorant of Tolkien, or maybe have just watched the films, and that's fine. That's fine if they haven't read the books and they just like the films. But they're going to watch this and they're just going to go, maybe this will make them even go like, "Oh, so Tolkien wrote all these stories about, Disa, and she's a character in the book," and they're going to take it at face value. They're going to think that this shit is in the books, and nothing infuriates me more, because the man is dead. Like, Tolkien's dead, like, and his legacy is just being shit all over right now with this piece of shit series. That they're using his name only just to try and bankroll it and to get a profit off it. And every time it hit the credits and it said based on the works of Tolkien or based on J.R.R. Tolkien, I wanted to just flip the screen a double middle finger, because I was like, there is nothing remote, apart from character names, there is nothing remotely Tolkien about this. All of the story, most of the characters have all been made up for this shit. And it's just terrible. It's really shit, considering all the stories they could have told with this, and all the characters and provinces they could have showed with this series. Even with like the more limited material they've only got to work with the Second Age. So you're talking about the deviations here from the book. Bathsong, you mentioned what he did to Denethor wasn't justified. I think all the elements from Denethor's character that we see in the film are there in the book. I think they're just dialed up a hell of a lot more in the film. And it's a little bit more three-dimensional. There's a little bit more sort of moral grey area in the book, certainly. The fact that Denethor still does light the beacons of Gondor. I don't like the whole thing in the Return of the King film with Gandalf kind of slapping Denethor around and like knocking him out with his, like, that's just, it gets a reaction out of people, in that moment, because Denethor is very much demonized and you don't really get that sense of pathos with the character. Very much in the book, I would say that King Theoden and Denethor are sort of mirror images of each other, and sort of a comment on despair in wartime, and apathy, and just losing the will, really. And where Theoden pulls himself out of it, Denethor kind of accepts it and gives into grief and fear and everything, and the destructive factor that can have. And I like how those two characters are kind of in tandem with each other. I really like that. So I think Denethor serves his function in the film. And as I say, I think all of the elements with this character are there in the book, but they've just dialed it up a lot more. And obviously they've left a lot of stuff out as well, haven't they? But yeah, that whole thing with like Gandalf knocking Denethor out, I've always disliked that. And maybe if I eventually do my fan edit of the Lord of the Rings films to tie in with my Hobbit fan edit, which, by the way, shameless ploy. If you haven't seen my Hobbit fan edit, there are links to it in the description down below. If you want to kind of cleanse the palate a little bit, or maybe you just want more Tolkien in your life. I actually was watching a bit of The Hobbit earlier, which is like the most narcissistic thing to do, isn't it? But I just needed something to clear the palate after this show. I really did. And remind myself what Tolkien feels like. But yeah, go and check it out. It's a fan edit that I did of the Hobbit trilogy. I think it's good fun. I had fun making it. Please do go check that out and let me know what you think. Yeah, Isildur's very much demonized as well. I think it probably serves the film as well though, to show like the destructive impact that the ring can have on someone, and how evil and covetous it makes you. But yeah, there's a few examples like that throughout the films, but I think mostly the message is there, and the intention was there ultimately. Yeah, you mentioned the Mithril there. He's going to quickly knock up the doors of Moria. Yeah, you're probably right. I didn't mind Durin being mad about the 20-year thing because they're building towards mortality. Yeah, I think you could do that, definitely. Like, there's a way to do that, but just him being mad that he just hasn't popped in for a cup of tea in 20 years, just a bit like, come on, dude. Like, you're fucking Prince of the Dwarves. Like, what are you getting so mad about this for? Yeah, it did get really overly comedic, didn't it? With Disa and, this bickering married couple kind of thing between the two of them. But I didn't mind her, but it's just the way she played the character was just a little bit too silly for me. And as I said, it's just impossible, just in terms of the geography of the world. Bath Time says, now I thought Disa was going to be unbearable, but she wasn't anywhere near as annoying as I thought she was going to be. I agree. I mean, we've only seen her in one episode, so we'll have to see how the rest of the series goes. But yeah, I'll speak as I find. I didn't think she was as cringeworthy as I thought she was going to be, but she is dialed up a little bit, and it's, yeah. To be fair, one of the best lines in the trilogy was "Meat's back on the menu, boys. It makes no sense in the look, but it was quality." I totally agree with you. I love it, and in my everyday, that is one that I quote the most. That and "Fool of a Tuck" are definitely my main two. And I totally agree. Menu's a French word. Tolkien would flip his shit about that. It's a word of French origin. The fact that the Uruk-hai and orcs know what a menu is ridiculous, but that just makes me like it even more now, because I'm thinking about Isengard, and I'm thinking about like in the cafeteria section, like after a hard day's work of slavery for the orcs, getting all the shit ready in Isengard, they then go to the mess hall and they're given a menu, and they know what a menu is. I love that. It's a great line though. It is satisfying moment when he decapitates Snagger, isn't it? I think the orc's called Snagger. Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys. And he lets out that roar, and then bum 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 kicks in. See that guy just ripping the fucking intestines out of him. It's just like, love it. Love it. I really want to do. Would you guys be down for maybe after this series is said and done, and I really need to find my love of Lord of the Rings again? Would you guys be down for like a live watch along of the Lord of the Rings? Like, we just all sit down and just watch the extended edition together, and I just kind of give a live commentary like this, just watching it, just going, "Oh, this scene's great. Oh, this bit's amazing." I'd be down for that. It could be good. It could be good fun. Just like, we'll pick a weekend, pick a day we're all free, and just throw the movie on, get it synced up with each other, and just watch it. That'd be cool. Let's power through then some more. So, okay, then Elrond. Elrond invokes the right of this ancient dwarven custom. It's like this test of endurance, and this is where there was like some really shitty expository dialogue. It was, Prince Dorian walks in, and clearly Elrond knows what this custom is because he invoked the right of it when he went in, so he knows exactly what it is. And all the dwarves know what it is, but we, the audience, don't know what it is. So Prince Dorian walks in and he's like, as you know, the custom of this means that we bring out stones and we have to break them, and whoever doesn't break the stone or tires out or gets exhausted first is the loser. And that means that you're banished, and if you win, then it's like they know this shit. We don't know it, the audience, but it's that awkward expository dialogue that it doesn't make sense to these characters that they talk about that. And I feel like if they didn't explain the rules of it as to what they were doing, we would still pick up on that by the end of it. And Elrond's just swinging a fucking sledgehammer and just breaking rocks, and it's just okay. Elrond shouldn't even be a friend of the dwarves at this point, but okay. We've got the worm attack now. God, it just gets better and better, doesn't it? It really does. Hey, Nikki's down for a watch along Lord of the Rings. Do I hear anyone else? Any other takers? Yeah, I think that could be really fun. I am tempted for shit. We're only a few months away now. This is actually really depressing, but this December marks the 10th anniversary of the first Hobbit film. So, part of me is tempted to watch the Hobbit films as well in a live commentary, because I think there's actually probably more to say and critique about the Hobbit films. But since I've done my edit of those films, I really kind of don't want to watch the original versions of those films because I'm so used to my version of the edit, which again is a very narcissistic thing to say, but maybe I'll do a watch along of my edit. Maybe that'll be a good opportunity where people can like check it out with me, and I can, because I haven't done a director's commentary. Sorry, that was really, I didn't mean that at all. Editor's commentary on it. I haven't done one yet, and that could be cool. I could talk about my processor behind it, but yeah, I'll figure that out anyway. We've got a few months until then. I might watch the Spanish version to see if he's called Elrondo. That'd be amazing. The worm attack. Okay. So Galadriel's still swimming. Just keep swimming. She just keeps swimming. And then this raft appears out of nowhere, which is a cracking bit of luck. And there's this woman on there who's just completely racist as shit. She's like, oh, it's a woman. Like, we must help her and we must give her some water. And then she finds out she's an elf and she's like, oh, she's a dirty, fucking filthy elf and we want to throw her overboard again. She's a witch. May we burn her? Burn her. Yeah, and this is where we're introduced to Halbrand, who's the pretty boy who's totally not going to be Sauron by the end of this show. And yeah, it eventually leads to the worm attack. We learned that these were these refugees? No. Did they say where they were from? I can't remember. Did they say they were from like Harad or something? I can't remember what they said. We get the worm attack, which it was an action scene. It didn't really do anything for me. It just felt like there's a lull in the episode now, so we need an attack. And of course, Halbrand and Galadriel, the people with plot armor, just survive instantly. I can't remember how. Doesn't Halbrand like separate the raft? I can't remember how he gets away from it. I think you see him like untying the bindings on it or something, because he just knows that the worm is going to perfectly break it in half and he's going to be fine. So then he's just cast adrift, the name of the episode. It actually reminds me, he's not on tonight. I was going to say, if Carl was watching, I know he was a massive Lost fan. And I think the second episode of season 2 of Lost was called Adrift. And it was all like a raft episode where you've got Sawyer and Michael and Jin stranded on a raft. And there's a shark attack. And I don't know, it just kind of reminded me of that. There's a bit where Galadriel goes overboard and conveniently she's like attached to the mast that's conveniently attached to this rope that goes down with her, so that then Halbrand can jump off and pull himself down the rope, and apparently they're fine. And then the worm just fucks off as well. That was the main thing. It like shows up out of nowhere, attacks them, kills all the people that don't have plot armor, and then doesn't come back for more, and then it's just gone. I was like, oh, well, that's convenient. It reminds me of the stone giants, actually, from the Hobbit film, how these colossal, monolithic, larger than life things show up, and then as soon as they've done what they do, they just disappear, and they're just gone, and we don't hear them still fighting, and that's it. Let's see. Oh god, then we're on to the orc attack. I'm going to get a quick drink of water, guys. So talk amongst yourselves. Oh god. Oh, my voice is going to be gone. I went to a gig the other night where I was shouting at the top of my lungs. I'm talking for over 2 hours about the Rings of Power, and then I've got it's Saturday now. Yeah, I guess I've got a night out later on Saturday where I'm going to be shouting at the top of my lungs as well. Oh, I'm going to sound like Batman. Bath Time says that I thought the art direction between the worm and the boats was amazing, to be honest. I like how we didn't really see the worm completely up close. I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, the action scene itself just really didn't do anything for me. It just felt really thrown in, like that we don't really need this to happen. So I was hoping he made the mark of Saruman on a volleyball and call it Wilson. Love it. Okay, and we get our orc attack. I forgot the name of the kid. Like I can't remember the fucking names of the characters in this piece of shit. You've got the mom, the hot mom, who needs a bit of elf action in her life, and her son finds the sword, which I'm assuming is the sword of Sauron. My memory's really hazy on this bit. Theo, that's it. Yeah, thank you, Theo. I don't know. Theodore just really doesn't sound like a Middle Earth name, does it? Like Theodore. I don't know. That's just me. Maybe that's just me splitting hairs. And then they kind of do this bit where it's like a horror film where she's like hiding in a closet and the orc's out there. I thought that I'll say that I appreciate the fact that the orc was a person in costume and in makeup, but I didn't think the makeup was that great on the orc, I must admit. And I know we've seen pictures of other orcs that do look a lot better, but this one in particular, I just didn't think had a really good design. This whole action set piece was just fucking dreadful, and it was filmed atrociously. This was like, you know, shaky cam and the orcs like flipping desks, and it's just flipping tables and shit. I thought it was a really, really bad fight. I thought the fight choreography was really bad. It was just kind of laughable. I thought the acting was pretty terrible. The scream that the mom yells out when she awkwardly picks up this sword and like jabs it through the orc, and then the orc gets the sword snagged on something, and then Theo kind of loops a rope around his neck and lifts it in the air. It's just really bad. It's just a really bad fight, and they spammed it full of shaky cam to try and mask the fact that it wasn't that great. And then, you know, strong, independent female moms can do it too. She decapitates the orc, and she's like there, like boom, like puts the head on the desk. She's proud of that shit. You know, moms get it done. I'm like, God, between Galadriel and this bitch, like we just can't win, can we? We just can't win. Can we just have a vulnerable woman for once, like with an actual personality and who's likable and has something about them, like a personality? That would be nice. Yeah, then he like picks up the sword, and like the blood from him goes into the sword, which kind of sparks it up. So I don't know if he's going to be some kind of character like Celebrimbor in the is it Celebrimbor in the Middle Earth games, the War in the North, Shadow of Mordor. You play as Celebrimbor. He's the main one, isn't he? You play as Celebrimbor, I'm pretty sure. How he's kind of like half in the Wraith world and half in the real world. Maybe they're gonna do that. What the fuck ever. But she kind of puts that head down. It's like, right, you know, we've got to act on this. Like, shit is happening. We can't be complacent because the village is getting like corrupted. Cattle are like becoming festering, and there's that hole in the ground. Right around this time, Diversity Elf goes underground and gets kidnapped by orcs. So next episode, we're going to have that bit of him in the torture pit. Let's see. I think that's basically it, and then the episode ends where we cut back to Galadriel on the raft, and then it looks like a ship from Numenor shows up, and a silhouette, which I'm assuming is going to be Tar Miriel, maybe, is going to be on the ship. And then we're going to do that whole thing, that whole side quest with Galadriel going to Numenor, which she never did, and talking to Queen Tar Miriel, who shouldn't be queen and should be married to Ar-Pharazôn, but she's not married to Ar-Pharazôn because no one can be fucking married in this show. Because apparently being married is a sign of weakness and submission, and we can't have that with our female characters. They've all got to be fucking single and miserable and obnoxious. Yeah, I'm actually surprised. I thought Galadriel would just like kill the worm herself. I thought she'd be like riding the worm like it's a scene from Dune, with a soundtrack by Toto. Yeah, the shit's gonna get worse as well, because we've seen clips of her leading cavalry charges and just being Joan of Arc and commanding her soldiers, and yeah, it's so transparent as well. And this thing's getting ratioed to shit as well. This thing's just getting like loads of dislikes. I'd say that's the one thing, well, that's the major thing that I've disliked about this show. It's not just the desecration of Tolkien, which just really, really irritates me, because I'm passionate about this shit, you know, like it, and it's not just me. Like Lord of the Rings, the world of Tolkien and everything he created and the legacy of that man, it means so much to so many people. And it is very much just kind of like the foundation of modern fantasy. Like we owe it to it, and just to see that, just to see it be taken and just manipulated, and current, you know, agendas and identity politics and, you know, representation, just all modern day shit just slapped onto it to try and pervert it and craft it into something it was never meant to be. Articles calling Tolkien a racist, calling people who don't like this show toxic just because they don't like it. It's the low-hanging fruit. And the same shit happened with Star Wars, and the same shit happens with Marvel. It's just consume products. Don't think about it. Consume products and just get ready and then consume next product. The shills on YouTube are all getting called out and ratioed as well, which is just absolutely wonderful to see. As I say, you know, like Bath Time, you mentioned, you jumped on the stream. You said that you really enjoy it so far. That's fine. I'm not going to say you can't. I'm not going to say that you're not a Tolkien fan just because you enjoy it. Of course not. This is just my opinion on it. My opinion as a Tolkien fan, and obviously people can have different opinions. But people going, oh, people are just going to dislike this because they want to. Dan Murrell said something really shitty on his stream, saying something like, he didn't like it either. He didn't care for it. And he was like, I can't tell you how much I really wanted to like this show just to spite all the people that have been really negative and want to hate it. I'm like, fuck you. Fuck you for saying some shit like that. You really wish you could have liked it just to spite people that didn't and were talking out negative against it. It's just like, fuck off, you self-righteous cunt. All these people, Nerd of the Rings especially, which I'm really shocked about actually. Like, I've followed Nerd of the Rings channel for ages, love his content. He seems like a really decent bloke, but he started his stream off saying like, if this is a review for people who, I'm paraphrasing what he said here, but it's on his main review that he's done for episodes 1 and 2. He says that this, if your opinion is negative on this or something like this is not the review for you. This is a review for people who are quite open to it. So immediately he's just completely pigeonholing himself and silencing a whole, you know, vocal group of people that have an opinion as well that don't like it. It's like, oh no, I want to keep this an open, nice yeah, because you've got a fucking early screener for it, and you've got like 500,000 subscriber count. You want to get those early screenings to shit. Amazon paid for you to go to London, come to the UK, all expenses paid, for an early glimpse at it. It's the corporate. John Campier is the worst is the most loathsome cunt I have ever seen. Absolute corporate shill. God, I hate that. I've hated that man since Collider, and he's just like, I looked for reviews, for negative reviews after these first 2 episodes came out. Couldn't find a single one. It's an absolute tour de force. You know what he's like. He's a fucking twat. And I'm like, really? You couldn't find one negative review on the Rings of Power? Which is very surprising because every video is getting ratioed. Jeremy Johns has said that he's not watching it. Rageaholic did a great video earlier today as well, just saying, and I kind of agree with it, but I like this community here and I like talking with all of you guys about it. He says that the best way that we can counteract Amazon isn't to jump on videos like this and hate against it or talk about how much we hate it, because we're still putting them in the spotlight. The most damning thing that you can do in any relationship is just complete indifference. Just pretend like it's not a thing. Don't talk about it. Don't watch it. Just go on, because by not giving it attention, you're not fueling. You're not fanning the flames, which I can completely understand. And in any other circumstances, after watching these first 2 episodes tonight, I wouldn't continue the series. I hate this series. I hate the characters. The writing's terrible, and it's a complete atrocity and desecration of the thing that I hold most dear in my life, which is Tolkien's legacy, the Lord of the Rings, and all of the subsequent novels. So in any other circumstance, I wouldn't be watching it. I avoided Kenobi. I had thoughts on Kenobi, and part of me wishes now that I had have done a weekly series on that. But yeah, I'm going to continue this. I'm going to continue it just so we can have this conversation. And, we've started it now. We're in it together, aren't we? So I feel like we're bound eternally. This is our fellowship right here. This is our fellowship. And we will take up this terrible task, though I do not know the way. And yeah, hopefully by the end of this episode, we'll fucking destroy this thing. Cast it back into the fires from whence it came. Let's see. Bath Time says, yeah, I enjoyed it. I knew what it was going to be, but I'm happy to see it on my and that's fair enough. If it kills a couple of hours, if you're just happy to be back in Middle Earth in whatever respect, or maybe you're just a fan of fantasy TV. Personally, I don't think it's good fantasy television, but if you do, if it's good escapism from you and you're enjoying it, then keep on with it, man. I'm not going to tell you to dislike something or how dare you like this thing. I'm not that guy. Some people are that guy, but I'm not that guy. So that's fair enough. We can disagree, but this is what I like. We can disagree on something, but you've mentioned loads of stuff earlier in the chat that I agree with you on. And we find that common ground with it, which is great. And this is how discourse happens. This is how conversation happens. And this is what I enjoy. I don't mind someone having a different opinion to me if they can back it up with their argument and, they argue their case towards it. I'm all for that, and multiple opinions make the world go round. I'm just sharing mine. This is just a platform for me to share mine. And I appreciate you as well, man. I've been as negative as you can probably get on this show, and will continue to do so more than likely. But I appreciate you for taking loads of time out of your evening tonight, and watching someone who disagrees, with your opinion. As I say, we've agreed on some stuff, but inherently disagreed. But you've still tuned in and watched, so I really appreciate you. I do. Nikki says, Nerd of the Rings got access and was turned to Sauron. Yeah, and here's the thing, and you might call me petty, and that's fine. Go ahead. I've been called worse things publicly on the internet from my opinions around the Rings of Power. After I saw that comment at the start of his review where he said, if you don't like this, or you've always wanted to dislike this, or you have negative opinions on this, this is probably not going to be the review for you. I thought, fuck you. And I unsubscribed. I unsubscribed from Nerd of the Rings, and I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do that because, as I say, I've watched his content for years. I think he's the best channel for Lord of the Rings content. Him and Men of the West. I've watched countless hours of their content and love it. Men of the West is doing his review this weekend, I think. I think he's mentioned Sunday because he's really busy, but he has posted on his Facebook and he has posted on his Twitter that he doesn't like it. He very much dislikes it and has a lot of problems with it. So I respect him for that. You know, he'll probably be balanced because he's got a lot of subscribers as well, and he probably doesn't want to piss off one side of the other thing or the other. And he always says that he never wants to. He always says he never wants to get political in his videos. I think he does study politics. I think in his university degree or college degree. I know he's in the States. I can't remember what they call it over there. And he's mentioned in the past about how Star Wars, with the Star Wars sequel trilogy, they were full of agenda politics, and you know, they were trying to get across the message, as Critical Drinker would say, and it was like story and character and plot to the wayside, but you know, well, we've got to be as diverse as possible, and we've got to make Rey and Mary Sue like super strong and just, you know, really boring and overpowered and all that shit. We've got to tear down our icons, and Luke's got to be a hermit, and you know, all the stuff that you know is the problems with the Star Wars sequel trilogy. And he spoke out against that, and he says that he was a massive Star Wars fan, but he really hated the sequel trilogy because they injected that stuff. But he kept saying, like, I don't want to get overly political and everything like that. But I get the impression that he's probably, I don't think he's far right. I think he's probably central, but tending towards the right, which is kind of, I mean, I'm apolitical. I really am. I'm like so apolitical. I don't watch the news. I don't give a shit about politics at all. You know, I know you never meant to talk about politics. I don't know where you'd put me on the. I guess I'm mostly central. You know, live and let live kind of thing. I think I'm probably central right, maybe ever so slightly. But again, I don't like to bring politics into things. But yeah. As you mentioned, Men of the West is being very silent, but he has mentioned that he really dislikes it. He's watched episode 1 and has loads of problems with it. So we'll see. But he says, like, I'll give episode 2 a go and see what I think of it. But if you just think the potential that Amazon had, you know, the most expensive show ever, and you've got rights to the Lord of the Rings appendices, and it's like, don't fuck this up. But they fucked it up. They fucked it up big time. I know Rotten Tomatoes isn't anything to go on because people can review bomb that. I think last time I checked it was on 37. I don't go by Rotten Tomatoes anyway, but I just thought it was worth noticing. But I think what speaks volumes is the ratioing going on all of the trailers that have been released, on all of the featurettes, on shill channels that are being called out as shills and being quite openly as shills. People are making their voices heard, you know, with the dislikes, although the dislikes are hidden. If you get the extension, you know they're there. And I can quite honestly say I haven't seen this level of reception to a show I can't think of one. I can't think of something that's been ratioed this hard. Even the Star Wars sequel trilogy, like even Rise of Skywalker, that was still mostly positive. You know, people were holding on, kind of seeing how they were going to finish it all off and everything. Whereas this, I have never seen a show this dead on arrival. And the viewing figures will be great for the first couple of episodes. I think even maybe for the next couple of weeks, viewing figures will still be high. We'll never know the true viewing figures, though, because Amazon are going to lie about that shit. But I do think there will be a massive drop-off. I really do. But I guess we'll have to wait and see, won't we? Bath Time says, the best Lord of the Rings channel I found is Tolkien Untangled. It's got like only... let me check, actually, if I'm subscribed to that one. The name rings a bell. Tolkien Untangled. Yes, I am. Yeah, he did a really, really great video of all the differences. I think he's only done for Fellowship at the moment. All the differences between the Fellowship book and the Lord of the Rings films. And I was actually planning a fan edit on the Lord of the Rings films to try and make them a little bit more book accurate. Or at least more accurate in line with the Hobbit edit that I've done. Because I made like Galadriel. I've made a Glamdring Glow Blue, Gandalf's sword. So I wanted to go to the Lord of the Rings films, correct some of the continuity mistakes, and to make Glamdring Glow Blue, so you can watch my edit of The Hobbit and then you can watch these new versions of Lord of the Rings. Part of me was also tempted to do 2 different versions of them. One that is basically just the films as they are, as I said, clearing up some of the continuity errors, making Glamdring Glow Blue, but keeping the structure of the trilogy the same. And then I did want to have an attempt at one just to see how it would go, matching the structure of the films to the books. So starting the Two Towers film off with the death of Boromir, for example, having Shelob, telling the chunk of the story from Aragorn's perspective first, then Pippin's, then Frodo's, having Shelob and all that stuff in the Two Towers movie, removing the elves from Helm's Deep, and ending with Frodo's capture at Cirith Ungol. And editing it like that. So I'm still mulling over that idea. Currently, I'm kind of brainstorming ideas and chipping away at a Star Wars sequel trilogy edit at the moment. I am called the Hobbit fan editor on here. I am curious if you guys would be interested in sort of like any videos where I talk about some of my ideas for my edits that I'm doing, or maybe even show you some. I know copyright's a weird thing on here, isn't it? Show you stuff I'm working on, or say these are some ideas I've had. What do you guys think of them? And then we can kind of like help craft the edit together. I don't know if you guys would be interested in that. If you're not, that's absolutely fine. I'm just looking for some other avenues on the channel that we could talk about. Bath Time says I'm okay with people having a different opinion to him. Don't worry about it. That's really cool, man. That's really cool. It's been a great conversation as well. We've had a really good conversation about it today. And ultimately we have a shared love of Tolkien, which is great. Sorry, I mentioned that one already, Nikki. and thanks for tuning in still, Nikki. You guys are all troopers. I love this. It's been going for almost over 2.5 hours now. It's almost 2 that I'm going to have to take off to sleep because I'm up early tomorrow for work, which is going to be fun. Mathside says, going to be hard to do Gandalf on Weathertop when they're legging it out of the Shire. Yeah. So, I'm beholden to the films, right? There's only so much stuff that I can do. I wanted to kind of the hardest stuff, I think, would be Faramir, because obviously he takes them to Osgiliath in the movie, and the architecture and the backgrounds and everything are completely different from Ithilien to Osgiliath, where he takes them. So I've got to downplay Faramir's. See, I actually don't mind that in the films, though. I really don't, because I think if he just turned down the ring, I think that downplays the power of the ring, and ultimately you still kind of end in the same place. Initially he is tempted and he's wanting to win over his, it ties into his father, and he's trying to bring his father back a mighty gift. And then eventually he realizes the error of his ways and he lets them go. So you end in the same place that you do with the book, really. He doesn't want the ring. He puts that aside, which is still what Faramir's character does. I think it just makes him a bit more realistic to be tempted by the ring, because it's meant to be all corrupting. And I think if Frodo just like offered him the ring and he was just like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, but no, I don't want it. I don't know. I personally, I prefer the film and how that handles it. Did they need to go to Osgiliath to do all that? Probably not. But I guess it gives Frodo and Sam something to do in that movie, because the bulk of their story, that's the Two Towers, they decided to structure it into the Return of the King. So there's some things I could do that, I could probably try some rotoscoping maybe and have that decision come sooner at Ithilien. I'd probably put a little title card as well, maybe, that says 19 years later, to show that that time jump between Gandalf leaving the Shire and returning to the Shire. Granted, characters wouldn't age up and characters would look exactly the same even 20 years later, but at least it kind of brings things into the timeline a bit more accurately. Bath Time says, but you can pop in the SFX Gandalf did when Bilbo disappeared at his party. I don't know why, but it really annoyed me when I saw that. Pop in the... Yeah, because Gandalf's the one who, when Bilbo disappears, he quickly like adds some smoke or something, doesn't he? I think, or some lightning or something, so everyone else doesn't freak out and everyone thinks that it was actually Gandalf who did it and it was like a trick by Gandalf. So yeah, I mean, that's something I could do. Obviously with my limited knowledge of special effects stuff, but I could try and see what I could do with it. I can't gender flip Arwen and give Arwen blonde hair and pass her off as Glorfindel, unfortunately. So as I say, there are some things I'm going to have to keep. I can get rid of Gandalf beating up Denethor. One scene that I can't wait to try and edit actually is Gandalf and the Witch King's confrontation in the extended edition of Return of the King. Because Gandalf is way more powerful than the Witch King. He fears the Witch King, and he kind of sees the Witch King as almost an equal, but the Witch King destroying Gandalf's staff and overpowering him would never happen. I know at that point they're trying to say that evil's gaining ground a lot more and sort of overshadowing the good guys, but I don't know. There's quite a few things that I'd like to try and have a play with and mess around with the structure on. Sam being tempted by the outdoor section of B&Q when he was whizzing around Mordor. Are you talking about where he saw himself as like this gardener, like this lord of gardeners? Or are you talking about the bit with the watchers outside? Peter Jackson said he actually shot that scene. Those like security statues outside. I love that idea. I love that part in the book. And they're in the film. You see them in the background when Sam enters Cirith Ungol, but apparently they did actually shoot the scene where he uses the file of Galadriel to get through the barrier, and it was removed, and we still haven't been shown the deleted scenes yet. Can you get the ghosts out, please? It's difficult. It's very difficult because they play such a pivotal role at ending the battle, don't they? But I know it is kind of very one-sided at the end. I don't think I could get the ghosts out. I do want to remove some stuff from the extended edition, though, of the Paths of the Dead. And I'm probably going to go with the theatrical version of how that scene's played out. Because, you have Aragorn who says, he's like, fight for me. What say you? Boom, cut to the next scene. And we don't get the answer. We don't know what happened there. So when the Corsair ships show up later in the film, we're like, oh, fuck. And then Aragorn jumps off and we're like, holy shit, like they did decide to fight. And it's a shock for the audience, as it should be. But in the extended edition, we're shown everything. It's like, we fight. And then this is the first scene I'll cut out. I actually don't like this scene in the Return of the King extended edition. The really cheesy Corsair scene where it's like, boarded by Yuanu's army. This army, and they take, because then when the ships show up, it's like you already know it's Aragorn. Whereas if you remove that, then there's the surprise there. So I actually do prefer the theatrical way that was handled. It's the last alliance of men, not all these militant. Yeah. Oh God, one of my favorite bits in the Return of the King book is where Aragorn shows up. And he meets with Éomer on the battlefield, and they proper bro scene, and it's like Rohan and Gondor are finally united, and it's so cool. That bit where they meet on top of the hill, brilliant, love it. But as I say, I'm beholden to the movie, so there's some things that I've just got to deal with. I've just got to do. I got to do what I got to do. But as I said, I'm working on the Star Wars sequel trilogy edit at the moment, and I honestly don't get much time to edit now, sadly, because most of my free time is on music practice, which I should have been doing tonight. But instead, I don't begrudge it, though. I wanted to come on and talk to you guys about the Rings of Power anyway. And this stream's been really fun. This has been an absolute blast. So if this helps me get through the series, that I get to talk among such excellent and admirable viewers, then all the better for it, because I love Lord of the Rings, in case you couldn't tell. I love talking about this shit, and it's a good discussion for sure. It's definitely bedtime. It's definitely bedtime. But yeah, no, I'm glad you enjoyed it, mate. So I don't have a banner going up, but let's stick to this schedule. I'll post it on my socials, and I'll do a quick little bit of housekeeping right now in case you aren't subscribed or aren't following me. I encourage you to do so. So please do feel free to subscribe to my channel for more movie reviews, discussions, and live streams. Let's lock it into this then. So let's say every Friday at 11 p.m. British Standard Time, we'll talk about the new Rings of Power episode. If that sounds good to everyone else, that sounds damn good to me. And do follow me on Twitter. Here I'll post the times that I'm going live, if there's a change of plan, if anything changes, and just other little things along the way. You can follow me on Twitter at Hobbit Fan Editor. And speaking of my Hobbit Fan Edit, there are links in the description down below to this video where you can find my Hobbit Fan Edit. And please do give it a watch if you got some free time, and let me know what you think of it. I'd really appreciate that. In the meantime, if you're discovering this stream after the fact, and I mean most people have already throughout this stream tonight, let me know what you think of the Rings of Power. Did it surprise you? Is it better than you thought it was? Are you completely ambivalent towards it, or did you absolutely fucking hate it? Anywhere on that spectrum, please do let me know. In completely different news, I will be live again on Tuesday, continuing our James Bond retrospective marathon review series that we're doing, 60 years of Bond, and we're starting the Daniel Craig era with, in my opinion, his best Bond film, which is Casino Royale. Really looking forward to seeing this one on the big screen. That's going to be Tuesday, the 6th of September at 11:30 p.m. British Standard Time. And I think we've also got Cobra Kai season 5, which I will be probably reviewing sometime after the 10th. There's a whole story about that, which I will get into. But yeah, we're going to be talking some Cobra Kai as well once that's released to the masses, and we get to talk about one of my favorite TV shows of all time, which is Cobra Kai. Anyway, a big thank you to everyone that has joined tonight, that has sat for almost 3 hours, almost the running time of a Lord of the Rings film, to chat all things Rings of Power, Middle-earth related, from video games to books to everything in between. This has been great, so I really appreciate you guys, and hopefully check in with you all next week for some more Rings of Power. So until then, take care, everyone.